Recently, I've been suffering from a wee bit of whiskey fatigue. You know, that way where you've maybe just had a bit too much, or you haven't had much of a break, or you're just kind of feeling a little bit whiskeyed out. Take a wee bit back and maybe take a break. Well, what if you have to man the vPub every week, or if you're regularly at tastings and events and hosting people or doing whatever, and sometimes it can be hard to dial a big enough break in order for you to get your mojo back, to get your happiness with whiskey back again. Well, they say that a change is as good as a break. And recently, I was speaking to a pal, and that pal talked to me about how he gets around it. He's in the industry and he really struggles. He's at events, he's hosting tastings, he's doing it all the time. And he reminded me of something that I do every summer, usually when I'm on holiday in Spain. I take a break too. Or let's say I make a change and I do the exact same thing that he does. Instead of sipping neat whiskies and examine them and analysing them for aroma and flavour, I pour myself a tall drink, a mixed drink. Still enjoy that whiskey flavour, but oops, it's much more relaxing and laid back. What I'm making right now is probably the easiest mixed drink that exists, and it works perfectly for whiskey. It's a highball. I usually put in 1 part whiskey to 3 parts soda, somewhere of that order. Give it a wee sugar. It's gonna be quite noisy for the night tonight, but that's okay. And this is how I kinda help give myself a wee bit of a reset and still find ways to enjoy my whiskey. Of that first hit, that kinda minerally hit from the soda as well. So, all of that got me thinking about what type of whiskies I might use, and through falling down that rabbit hole, I ended up exploring quite extensively the top 10 best-selling Scotch malt whiskies that exist, and I found it a very interesting rabbit hole indeed. I'd like to share it with you tonight, and I'll see you all in a second. Cheers. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday night. Welcome to another vPub. Welcome to a flight of whiskies. It's probably the biggest flight, or let's say the most variety that I'm ever going to sip through on a vPub. I've never done as many drams as this in the past, but we're going to keep it very, very light and small and pour very, very small pours. But these are all going to be whiskies that, despite the fact that they are juggernauts in whiskey, they are really out there. They are the scale of how these whiskies are produced and how they're sold, the scale that they are sold at, really beggars belief. And yet, on the vPub, they get next to no airtime whatsoever. I mean, 1 or 2 have cropped up in the past, but really, we've got 10 whiskies in front of us tonight that I'm astonished how little airtime they get. And there's various reasons for that. And I think as we go through tonight, those reasons will become very, very obvious. But we'll have a wee bit of a summary at the end, and I can kind of share my thoughts. I'm saving my thoughts until the end, though, because we always have to give the whiskey a chance to change our minds a wee bit, right? All the whiskies that I'm sipping tonight are the official top 10 best-selling global malt whiskey brands. Now, I do have to caveat a little bit, and I'll do that right at the start. Trying to get data on this is very, very difficult. It's usually hidden behind a paywall, IWSR or the Scotch whisky industry bodies who collect this data, and obviously they make their money out of selling it to interested parties. And I'm not the type of interested party that wants to stump up the money that they're asking for that. So I've had to cobble together various bits of information from here and there, from articles online and things like that, and reports that are probably a wee bit out of date now. But I believe what I've managed to put together is the actual official list of the top 10 best-selling malt whiskies, domestic and export, for these whiskies for the year of 2022. There are probably 2023 figures out there already, being widespread and things, but they're probably a wee bit expensive and pricey. There could have been a bit of movement up to the top end, you know, position 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 certainly, but the top 5 is probably going to be absolutely locked in. And that little bit of movement isn't likely to be much. Regardless, that's what we're going to focus on tonight. Quite an interesting wee theme, and we'll see if it helps me kind of stretch my window, my perspectives a wee bit, and helps me realise just how fortunate I am to be sipping the whiskies that we normally sip on the vPub and share together. Anyway, welcome everyone. Cheers. I hope you're all doing very well. I hope the ice in the glass isn't too noisy, but this is quite tasty. Before we get into all of that, I'm going to do what I always do and jump into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. A couple of donations come in already, a couple of super chats, some virtual drams come in I want to mention first. Anthony Lambert is celebrating being a member of the Aquavitae Barflies. Thanks for your support, Anthony. You're very, very welcome. Gerben Luwerk as well. Sorry, Gerben, I always mispronounce your name, buddy. I'll work it out one day. He's celebrating being a member for 6 months, and he's saying a half year. Whoop, whoop. Fantastic. Thank you for your support. Alistair Grace celebrating being a member for 51 months with his pink barfly saying Glen Grant 10, the whiskey that started my journey. Very interesting, Alistair. And a whiskey that's very, very close to where you're located as well, of course. Jeff Whiskey is here too, celebrating being a member for 10 months, and he's saying, cheers, Roy, you're sounding great. Wink, wink. Jeff and I were discussing audio setups and the run-up to this vPub this evening. Justin Wan is celebrating being a member for 11 months and saying highballs. That'll do for tonight, I guess. Right out where you are in Hong Kong as well, Justin. I can imagine it's pretty perfect. A generous dram in from Macallan in the Netherlands. Daniel Williams, don't piss off Pickle Ricky's saying like and subscribe. How did you get a pickle emoji? I've never seen such a thing before. I didn't even know that existed. Nice to see you, Daniel. Thank you very much for your drama, friend. It's always nice to welcome you, and I hope life in the Netherlands is good. David Hong in Hong Kong. No, sorry, David Hong is not in Hong Kong. David Hong is in the US. He's bought me a wee dram. No comment or anything. I'll just give that a wee love and a like, David, and hope that you're doing very, very well. Thank you very much for your generous dram. Also, my pal Jim from Northern Ireland Whiskey Novices in saying, Slangeroy, great subject, great to see so many in. And cheers, my friend. How we doing? We're doing okay for folk settling in. I don't have a window up tonight. I'll catch it a wee bit later. But it's good to have you, and regardless of who else is here, Jim, it's wonderful to have you, buddy. Codger is celebrating being a member for 12 months, saying nice tan, Roy. I don't have a tan. I think it's my camera settings, buddy. I've been out a wee bit, but believe me, despite this being a very summer-themed thing tonight, the weather hasn't been particularly conducive here to anybody getting a suntan. So I think it's just the camera. I did a reset tonight of everything, and it's the default settings are giving me a tan tonight. I don't mind that. Evening, Roy from Peebles, says Alan Gray, celebrating being a member for 31 months. Fantastic, Alan. Is that where you're located, down in Peebles? Got a couple of distilleries popping up around you down there now. Fantastic. Wonderful to have your support, buddy. Nice to welcome you in. And Rick Johnson from the States as well, saying, can't stay for the whole vPub, but I'll look forward to catching this one on the replay. As always, you pick the best topics, Roy, and cheers. Rick, thank you very much for your dram, and thanks to everybody. Get comfortable, pour a dram, and get settled for quite a few pours tonight. We're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it easy. And we're not going to sip too much. So normally I would kind of have 5 glasses out in front of me. And that kind of means that I keep note of how many drams I've had with you. And I can keep an eye on what I'm sipping. Tomorrow morning, I don't have any responsibilities in terms of driving or whatever, but that's not going to change much. It's still going to have me pouring just half measures tonight because we've got 10 whiskies to get through. And the other thing is that sometimes those 5 drams I'm sipping with you can be cask strength, 55, 60, 65% ABV beyond sometimes. But everything tonight, because these are best sellers, of course, the ABVs are all very, very low. That said, we still need to be careful and keep a lid on what we're sipping. Let me get my ice out of the way. Let me get my soda water out of the way, so we don't want to be knocking over anything in front of us. And I'm not needing my phone tonight. Let's make sure that's on Do Not Disturb, and I can get on with welcoming in the folk who are chilling in the lounge. Good to welcome you all. Carlos San Diego is here. Good to see you, my friend. He's saying hello around all the barflies around the world. I'm glad to watch the beginning of a vPub instead of on delay like usual, Carlos. It's always wonderful to have you in. Sometimes you need to pick it up on the replay, buddy. But you're one of those fantastic folk who take the time to leave a wee comment, and I know that you've picked it up. And I always appreciate it, Carlos. Wonderful to have you. My pal from the space side, Mark Slinger, is saying good evening, Roy. I'm now a stillman at Glenlivet. So Mark just started doing odd jobs working for Grants. Started doing a bit of work at Glenfiddich, and he's now a stillman up at Glenlivet. This is a man that was enjoying kind of his later years. He's made a wonderful chair out of a cask for me. My favourite place to sit in the house is that chair. And he just ended up kind of odd jobbing at Grant's. And now he's making whiskey. Fantastic, Mark. Congratulations, buddy. I hope it's going very well up there. One of your whiskies, maybe a couple of your whiskies might appear tonight. Maybe 3 of your whiskies. Jimmy Legg is here. Good to see you, big guy. Jimmy Legg is saying, I've tried a whiskey and soda last night to see if you're right about it, and it sucked. Listen, I know that if I'm trying to convince anybody in the community, one of the hardest people I have to convince is Jimmy Legg. However, I will admit that when he has been convinced, he is willing to step up and admit that he has changed his mind and he has been convinced. I don't need you guys to be sipping a mixed drink or a whiskey and soda or anything tonight. I have to say I'm quite enjoying this wee dram, so it's a good wee switch up, something to change it up a wee bit. Whiskey Weekend Dram is saying, I'm team ginger ale, aquavite, and good evening. So ginger ale is also a favourite of mine as well. And one of the things in Spain especially, soda water can be hard to come by in a lot of the bars and things. They have plenty tonic and things like that, but they sometimes don't have soda. So sometimes you'll switch it out and I'll have a whiskey and ginger if they don't have soda. And I think it works brilliantly as well, Harrow. Good to welcome you. Afternoon, Barflies, says Martin Fielder. Martin, so good to have you in. It's nice to welcome you. And Major Nut is here too, saying I have taken on the tradition of the Whiskey Vault tribe of taking a dry week now and then, at least once every 3 months. I think it's one of the best things that those guys do. Every quarter, their channel and the scale of their community as well, if they get a lot of buy-in from it. Every 3 months, quarterly, they have a dry week where everyone just gives it a break for a week. And I think it's a good thing to do. What I'm always careful of is that alcohol works different for different people. It affects them in different ways. And, people kind of have a different relationship with alcohol, let's say. Some people are better having small pours regularly, or just having a nice cadence and keeping it easy and balanced. And they tend not to do very well when they take big breaks where they starve themselves a little bit, and it's a little bit of a feast and famine thing. That said, you need to find what works for you, and you need to make sure that this ethanol that you're enjoying, this poison, is consumed responsibly. I don't want to get preachy. We don't do that in the vPub, but it's something, especially as I got older, it's always on my mind. Whiskey with Molly saying, good evening, Roy. Good to have you in, big guy. Always nice to welcome you, Ben. And Tim Pills is here saying, good evening, Roy. Interesting topic, although I don't think they'll match our top 10 favourite whiskies. Aha. I think that's going to be a lot of the point. Absolutely, buddy. Don Miguel is saying, evening, all you pals. We'll have a tropical night in Spain. Don Miguel in Spain, coming into from Spain. Fantastic to welcome you, bienvenido, Don Miguel. Falsgraph is saying the whiskies you pour tonight will mostly be 40%, so less danger of getting drunk. Absolutely, Falsgraph. But I have a theory about that too, and hopefully we'll get onto that a wee bit later. Road to Drama saying, evening, Roy Aquaviti. Looking forward to tonight's vPub. Always good to take measure of what is widely popular versus what geeks love. Spot on, Alberto. Wonderful to have you, buddy. And it's good that you've sussed out where my angle is coming from tonight. Prime Whiskey is celebrating being a member for 40 months. No comment or anything, but Prime Whiskey, thank you very much for your support. And Mark Chapman is saying Drambuie is a good mixer. Whiskey-based liqueur, absolutely. Very, very sweet. Not as sweet as Glavar, right enough, but a lot of folks' favourite. John van der Bort is in. Good to see you, John. He's saying happy to be back in Donnock after 8 months and catch the vPub live like an Irish and ginger beer once in a while, but I haven't really made any cocktails with Scotch. Well, they can be a bit fussy, if I'm honest, and sometimes we just prefer to pour a wee neat dram, and that's our vibe, right? But it's nice to try it once in a while. Jimmy Legacy, and how did Ben get to be a moderator before me? That hurts. Jimmy, we all have roles. We all have roles. And I am happy anytime, buddy, that you want to step up and put on a pair of overalls and grab that wrench and be a bit of a moderator. But you bring colour, humour, and I don't want to in any way give you extra responsibilities that might distract you from continually bringing your humour and colour, as you just pointed out to us. Okay, Hellswood is saying, great topic for what's hopefully a nice summer. Well, it's doom and gloom for the prospects here. I don't know what it is down where you're, Helen, but in the west of Scotland, we're looking at a wet summer. So we're told, apparently. Anyway, cheers, everyone. You might have noticed, let's just get the thing started because we've got 10 whiskies to get through. You might have noticed that the whiskey I poured tonight to make this little highball cocktail, this tasty highball cocktail, was a green labelled porter. And this is Glen Grant, or as they're calling it these days, the Glen Grant. The definite article has made it onto the labelling of Glen Grant too. This is a 10-year-old. This is their entry-level core range product. Almost all of the whiskies I'm going to share with you tonight, I'm bringing in the core range age-stated product, the ubiquitous product, the one that's shipped globally, the one that's most recognised. Of course, they do have non-age statement ones that come in a wee bit cheaper, maybe, and they certainly have other alternatives and finishes and goodness knows what else, but I'm going to focus on the core range for everyone. Despite the fact that when I share numbers with you tonight about how many bottles are sold, the bottle count will be over all their expressions. So not just the ones I'm going to share with you tonight. So we have to bear that in mind. Regardless, this is the Glen Grant from Speyside, 10 years old. And it's featured in an ignored vPub before, because I do believe that I am a wee bit guilty of ignoring Glen Grant. And I have to say, it's already been touched upon. It's the way that it's presented most of the time. This particular one's at 40% ABV. And like all the Glen Grant bottles, it talks about Major James Grant. And it's just doing what it does. It's just kind of sitting there. It's often on a very, very good price in the UK. It often goes on offer. It's the type of product that you would pick up at the supermarket. You wouldn't buy it at retail. You would wait until the supermarket discounts it, right? That's the kind of product that the Glen Grant is. That's the kind of space that it serves. Not often this green labeled 10-year-old one. There's other kind of cheaper ones that seem to do that right enough. That said, this particular Glen Grant tonight, I'll tell you, I paid £29 for this. That is a wee bit cheaper than RRP. I think RRP is closer to 35 of that order. Some people might have to pay up closer to 40 for it, but this is almost always regularly available a wee bit cheaper. The problem I tend to have with Glen Grant is that it can be so light. It's all just green apples to me, sweet green apples. And it can be lovely and it can be great to step change and switch up a little bit. It can be very soft, it can be very approachable and very easy. But it can also be a wee bit flat and uninspiring. Glen Grant, for me, tends to be something that sparkles when it's left alone for a long time. And that's got a lot to do with the fact that we've been spoiled over the years by very, very mature Glen Grant that was once upon a time very affordable. You could get your hands on it and taste how amazing the liquid could be at a ridiculously high age statement. That's gone now. Any high age stated product, regardless of the distillery today, is almost not affordable for most of us. So Glen Grant is presented like this. The only other bottle I've got on the shelf is the 15-year-old, which is nice at 50% ABV. I think it's better and it certainly benefits from a wee bit more flavour that extra alcohol brings, that 50% strength brings. But it's still not something I'm reaching for regularly. Where Glen Grant really sings, and this will be repeated throughout tonight, is from an independent bottler. Anyway, the reason I used Glen Grant for my mixer is because it was the first one I opened, because it's in position 10 tonight. Let me get these overlays up so that I can kind of keep everybody up to speed with everything as I go through. Let me see if I do that. Okay, I'm missing one. But I can tell you that this wee bottle of Glen Grant comes in at position 10, and down at the right-hand side of the screen down here, throughout tonight, this will build up, and I'll go through all of them, and I'll share the numbers with you as well. Every year, Glen Grant sells 3.1 million litres of, million bottles. The industry tends to measure things in 9-litre cases, which is a wee bit archaic because that used to be when it was 9 bottles of 75 cl, 750 ml. So that's synonymous with the States now. However, the harmonisation in Europe meant that we moved to 70 cl back in the early 90s. So it's not quite 9 litres, but regardless, it's still measured in 9-litre cases, which is a case of 12 bottles of whiskey. I've converted that for easiness tonight. So we're talking about 3.1 million bottles. To put that into context, this is 10th position. You're going to see that number increasing rapidly as we go through the bottles tonight. But the type of whiskey that we're sipping, let's imagine an Ardnamurchan AD outturn would be about 25,000 bottles. 25,000. Can you imagine how many outturns Ardnamurchan would need to go through in order to just hit 1 million bottles? Certainly, they're not going to get close to that in a year. A limited edition, something like a Longrow Red or something like that, would typically be about 8 or 9 or 10,000 bottles. Very, very small outturns. But amongst our community, those are the bottles that have a huge impact. Those are the things that we buy. Those are the things that we love to sip and take our time over and contemplate and get excited about and share. And these are kind of enthusiast-focused things, where the majority of the presentation is focused on flavour first. Fully natural, no added colour added, no stripped by chill filtration or anything, but small scale, very small scale. On the other hand, what I'm sharing with you tonight is designed to be as accessible as possible. By accessible, I'm talking about flavour, I'm talking about approach, I'm talking about softness, how it arrives. So the lower ABVs tend to fit there, right? The lower price points fit there too. And in order to get the price down, yes, they have to put it out there at 40% ABV, 43% export maybe. But if they're putting it out there, they have to chill filter it. If it's going to be a mass market product, they want to keep the colour consistent too. So they add a wee bit of added colour most of the time. Not all the producers I'm going to share with you tonight practice adding E150A. Some of them do. I believe that Glen Grant does, but not very much. This is quite a pale wee whiskey. Their biggest market, Glen Grant, is Italy. I've been in Italy many times and spotted Glen Grant on sale, sometimes as low as like 10, 12, 14 euros for a bottle. I don't know what it is today. It's been quite a few years since I've been in Italy, but that's what it was being sold for, and it was their 5-year-old. We don't see the 5-year-old here. The 5-year-old is sold at that age because it's a historical thing in Italy, where it was first imported in the 60s to compete with grappa. And yes, it was often mixed with a soft, fizzy mixer. And it does wonderfully well at it too. If I was to look at this one tonight, this 10-year-old, it is very, very apple forward, exactly what I expect. There is a nice wee creaminess to it. There's a wee bit of pineapple cubes, a wee bit of light fruit. You wouldn't push it as far as tropical, but it's kind of getting there. Almost reminiscent of there was a soft drink in the UK years ago. I don't know if it's still available now, called Lilt. It was pineapple and grapefruit soft drink. But yeah, along that theme. Very light. Apple fresh. A wee bit floral. Ridiculously, because of where I am and what the type of whiskies I normally drink, this is quite ethereal. You know, it lands on the palate, you swallow it, and it just kind of evaporates. It's gone. There's not a lot of kind of mouth coating. There's not a lot of texture or oiliness, or there's not a lot left to kind of convey any flavour after the sip. That's not intended to be negative towards it, because that's exactly as it's designed to be. Glen Grant is ubiquitous. It's available everywhere. It does best. It's doing quite well in France and places like that too. It does best in Italy. We can still get loads of it here. Perhaps you can where you are. It tends to be very inexpensive too. I would have to say, if I used the Dramface scoring tonight, this bottle would probably get maybe a 4, maybe closer to a 5. 4 or a 5. That's probably the best it could do, and it's not expected to do any better than that, let's be fair to it. But a decent wee bottle, and I'm not offended to have a wee bottle of Glen Grant 10-year-old on the shelf again. Pop it over there as long as it stays in shot. I've got a feeling this shelf is going to have to make a lot of space tonight. Let's move on to number 9 in a second. Lowlander is saying Little has been rebranded as Fanta, Pineapple and Grapefruit. What? That's terrible. That's terrible, Lowlander, isn't it? It's just destroying our nostalgia. No, it's not destroying it, actually. It's amplifying our nostalgia. That's what it does. Adwerty, it's interesting. Adwerty, are you the same person that's Odderty elsewhere? Is it Adwerty? You just... Anyway, what are you drinking tonight? Probably not an Aquavita's list, I'd guess. Yeah, he's asking Helen. Well, I would imagine that most of my community, buddy, is not drinking along with me tonight, but that's okay, because often I'm here to do what you don't have to do. Anthony Lambert is saying, first drank Glen Grant in the 1980s, cream-coloured label that was darker than the whiskey itself. Non-ice statement, can't really remember the taste, to be honest, but it got you drunk as a young squaddie. Right on point, Anthony. Ironic. 40% ABV, that beige label Glen Grant would have been as well. People were buying it for that reason. Jimmy Legacy and that Glen Grant will be a good pour for your children. I think my kids are getting quite snobbish attitudes towards whiskey, if I'm honest. And that's kind of half of the point of tonight's stream. Nothing to do with the kids, but just kind of to stretch your perspectives a wee bit and remind ourselves how kind of privileged a position that we're in most of the time with the whiskies that we normally drink. Lilt, like it like that. Was that legitimately an acronym? Or did they just make that up? Falsgraf is saying, you're right, Aquavite. Just about every Glen Grant that is not indie on my German supply site is coloured. We tend to enjoy our Glen Grants from independent bottlers, and I think that that's okay. Whiskey Liberation Front, good to see Lee G, and we thank you for it, Roy. He's talking about drinking these whiskies so you don't have to. We might uncover a good one, you never know. Hellswood is saying, likely not. Craig Allachie, 11-year-old spirit is Speyside release. Sumptuous. That's what Helen is drinking as she responds to Odderty. Justin Wan is saying, I have some gin for a palate cleanser. I think it works better than brown spirits, and maybe because I've got locally produced gin. Don't get me wrong, my wife enjoys a wee gin and tonic. We're on holiday too, and sometimes I'll join her. And I'm often really surprised and amazed that just a palate cleanser, fine, we could call it that, but it's very, very good as a refreshing reset. Reb Mordecai is here. The old beige Glen Grant 10 and 16 were delicious. I still remember them. I can't bring myself to buy the new Glen Grants. He's saying, okay, since Reb is in, I'm going to pour a tiny, tiny pour of something very, very, very nice. I'll maybe get a chance to talk about this a wee bit later. It's already been on the vPub. But I'm going to raise something very, very nice. Can everybody help me celebrate the birthday of a gentleman who's been around my channel since the very beginning, going way back to 2017. I first had exchanged words with our pal, Reb Mordecai. Why do we want to raise a glass to him tonight? Well, because he's celebrating a very significant milestone birthday tonight. I'll let him decide whether he wants to share how significant that birthday is. But right now, I'm just going to raise a glass to say many happy returns. Happy birthday to the gentleman that is Reb Mordecai. Please, everyone, raise a glass and fill up the chat. Happy birthday, big guy. I hope you're having a fantastic week, and we are privileged that you would spend your time here with us tonight on your birthday, Reb. Fantastic to have you in. My pal Jason Whiskey Wise is in here saying, good evening, Aquavite, Roy, and good evening all. Wonderful to welcome you here, buddy. I hope you're keeping well too. You have a habit of working too bloody hard, Jason. So I hope you're relaxing tonight. Chris Pollack is saying Aguaviti. I was so offended I poured a sample of Springbank 12 gas strength. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's move on to position number. And I'm quite happy for you. I need to keep track of these glasses. So everything is laid out 1 to 10 in front of me, but this is an oddball. So I'll put that off to the side. That's my cheers glass for Reb. There's one I poured earlier before the mixed drink. This is a nice pour. There's a reason I like this dram, but we'll get to it. It's much higher up the bestseller list. In position 10, very green apple, very sweet green apple, Glen Grant. Anyway, number 9 is a wee bit different. Number 9 is actually Aberlour. So we're very, very quickly switching from kind of the Glen Grant's more kind of bourbon cask maturation flavour profile to Aberlour, which is much more kind of sherry cask leaning. Aberlour is not exclusively sherry cask. Maybe once on a time it certainly was, but these days very bourbon and sherry. But most of the expressions that they put out, and certainly most of the expressions that we connect with, would be predominantly sherry cask matured. The one I've got here tonight, I didn't have this on the shelf. I actually plugged a gap and purchased this one tonight. But you might be not be surprised that, given the remit I've told you I was going to go through tonight with the ubiquitous core range stuff, it's actually the Aberlour 12-year-old double cask that I'm sharing with you tonight. Now, there was once upon a time that Aberlour had a fantastically good value product in their 10-year-old in a tall round bottle. It tended to be in a different shaped bottle from the rest of the range. It was sold all over France, and it was a very popular whiskey here in the UK. And it's been a long time since I've seen that 10-year-old. I think it's long been discontinued now. I think it didn't perhaps fit with the kind of more kind of luxury type branding that Aberlour has been going for in more recent years. I'm going to collect quite a lot of seals tonight. This is going to be a record when it comes to uncorking as well. Oh, I'm muted pop there. Surely we can do better than that, Aberlour. Ah, there we go. It's not Aberlour, it's the user, isn't it? Let's put a wee half pour in here. A wee bit of Aberlour in the glass, and you can see right away that we're in much, much darker tones, much darker whiskey. It means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing. At this end of the market, these are here to help suggest what the flavour profile might be, to help keep it consistent, and to deceive, let's be honest. It is what it is. We're not going to change anything, not in any hurry. They're not in any hurry to change things at their side. I can understand those practices when it comes to blends, Scotch whisky blends, those type of products. But malt whiskey is too precious to add colour to it. Especially when you add colour and don't put anything on the bottle. End of rant. I will try not to go there tonight. I have to be fair to Aberlour immediately, so that green apple freshness from the Glen Grant is contrasted by much darker, earthier, richer tones. We've got red berries here. We've actually got a punnet of overripe strawberries. It's really quite pleasant. It's quite nice. There's a creaminess about here too. There's a freshness, a nice minty green note. Gooseberry even, maybe a gooseberry type thing. Quite surprising. I have to say, as nosing a whiskey goes, and I appreciate that this is a benefit of a low ABV, you can stick your schnoz right in the glass and you're not getting anaesthetised by the high ABV. It is still working as an anaesthetic, definitely, but it's much, much gentler. It's easier to nose. Strawberry jam, my goodness, so strawberry. Anyway, cheers, everyone. All of my perspectives tonight are going to come from the point that I'm an enthusiast, I'm a whiskey geek, and the type of things I contrast it with what I normally drink. It's going to be very difficult for a fresh, young It's not young, it's 12 years old, it's pretty mature, but a modern, contemporary, fresh 12-year-old whiskey at 40% to compete with most of the other things that's on the shelf. On the palate, at least, and on the palate it doesn't. But that was a lovely, lovely nose. Just a wee bit let down by quite a flat palate. James DeGilio, good to see you, buddy. He's saying it's not 28 months and 42 in whiskey. No, it's 28 months and 42 in whiskey. Fantastic, James. It doesn't matter what the Barflies thing says. If you drop out or skip it, change your card or something, I know that you can potentially lose that. Doesn't matter to me. James, I know you've been around for a long time, buddy. It's good to have your support. And Whiskey Works Graham, a pal from Northern Ireland, is celebrating being a Barfly for 48 months and saying, what a 4 years it's been. Cheers, Aquavitae. Graham, you and I are going to get a chance to hang out later this year, aren't we? Fantastic. Talking of which, I hope that everyone's saving the dates. 28th of September for an informal gathering in Glasgow. More to follow. And 9th of November is the Saturday of the Glasgow Whisky Festival weekend. I'm going to be setting up events on the Friday, on the Saturday, and the Sunday. We're going to push things a wee bit further this year. James has bought me a dram. Peter Lee coming to Rhode Island. Pretty excited. Fantastic. Let's give a wee love and a like to that. Peter Lee is the traveller. He's the VIP. He's the perfect host. What a guy he is. James, thank you very much for your dram. Cheers. Don Miguel is pointing out Aberlour 12 non-chill filtered at 48%. It's delicious. Amazing what they did there. They put out a 12-year-old, a standard 12-year-old back in, I don't know if they're still doing it now, Don, and they put alongside it and released at the same time a 48% non-chill filtered version. I agree with you. It was up there with some of the best Aberlour I've ever enjoyed. It was as good as some good batches of Aberlour's Abuna. Aberlour Abuna changes over the years. People always talk about how the years gone by were much better. I went and bought a very, very old bottle. From memory, I think it was batch 16 of Aberlour's Abuna. Abuna is it's a Gaelic for the original, so it was really how whiskey would have once been made and presented back in the day, when it was really, all of it was going into blends, and anything that was sipped would have been sipped locally. It would not have been exported. It would not have been bottled in the way that we do today. It would not have been reduced with water. It would have been at cask strength, and the Abuna was to recreate that really potent, powerful whiskey, and it was fantastic at it. It remains fantastic at it, just a lot more expensive now. But I purchased that 16-year-old, and I compared it to other batches of Aberlour Abuna that I had. I think I did it on a vPub a few years back, and found it to be delicious. But really, I don't know how much I would suggest that it's gone downhill. I think it's still a fantastic product. This is just an easy drinker. It's going to be easy to throw down. The thing that's got going for it as 12-year-old is it noses really nicely. Wee bit of rose water and Turkish Delight now. Number 9, Aberlour 12-year-old. But Aberlour sells 4.2 million litres. Quite a jump up there, and 1.1 million over the position 10. By the way, there's an argument that the other position 10 could have been Dalmore. They're very, very close in terms of sales with Glen Grant, Dalmore and Glen Grant, Dalmore and Glen Grant. I went with Glen Grant based on the discoveries and the numbers that I could find, and also what I wanted to share in the switch up and the mix up tonight. There's a good chance that maybe 2023 figures are going to come out and Dalmore could be at number 10. Regardless, Aberlour sits at number 9, 4.2 million bottles per annum. Whiskey Novice Jim is saying, I haven't bought an Abuna for ages, Aquavitae. They just stretched the price a little bit. Aberlour, a great sherried space cider. Well, I was tempted last year because you remember there was a lot of sales switching about as 2023 switched into 2024. There were some great offers on, I don't recall what batch it was, but it was a recent batch of Aberlour Abuna, and I almost bought it until I realised that I've still got 1 or 2, maybe 3 bottles, 3 different batches on the shelf of Abuna open. So they need cleared out first, regardless of how cheap the offering was. Highland Hamish, good to see you, Hamish. He's saying, are you mentioning dates, Roy? Inverness Whisky Festival, Saturday, 29th of June. Looking forward to see some barflies up north. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? 29th of June. I know that I'm doing something on the weekend of, I think it's 30th is the Sunday. So that's the Saturday. The 30th is the Sunday, and I'm at a tasting in Edinburgh. I love Inverness. I'd love to be up there, Hamish. Yeah, regardless, I know you guys are going to have a brilliant time. It's going to be a well-attended event too, hopefully. Terrific stuff. But Hamish, thank you very much for your drama, friend. Cheers. Right, let's keep moving here. Let's move into position number. Take a wee drink of water here, actually, between these. With the expansion of Aberlour, I'm worried about future prices, says Jason Whiskywise. I would hope that the increase of scale would mean that in the future, especially the products that I'm sharing with you guys tonight, should benefit from that. I do worry that some of the more precious stuff, some of the more premium stuff will be milked a little bit to help subsidize all of that investment. Lowlander is saying, are you going to the Belfry tasting? Lowlander, I am. Very much looking forward to it. I hope that Sevi is able to join me there too. But well spotted, Lowlander. That's exactly where I'm going. Will I meet you there? Fantastic. Okay, let's move into the only Islay, actually, that's in our top 10. No spoilers. There's one Islay in our top 10, and it is, of course, Laphroaig. It's been through a wee bit of branding revamps in recent years. Here's some branding from about 20 years ago that I opened recently. I remember when John Campbell was on, I opened this. You can see I've gotten through it quite well. There's only a wee dribble of this left. Fantastic Laphroaig 10. Just so tropical, so light, so delicate, but so kind of still got a lot of concentrated flavour in there. Really quite compelling wee bottle of whiskey. In more recent times, there was a rebranding in between that and this one I'm going to show you now, but I don't have one of those on board. This is what it was looking like up until very recently. This is the standard Laphroaig 10-year-old, and if my camera focuses, there we go, you can see it's just the bog standard 40%er. I think it looks quite smart. I think this looks good. But they have gone and they've rebranded a wee bit more and updated it yet again. So they're going for about 5 or 6 rebrands in the space of like less than 2 decades, which is just the way of it today in modern times. And I have to say, looking at this bottle, it's the prettiest rebranding I've seen in a long time. It's just very recognizable as Laphroaig. It's much more evolution over kind of revolution. I think it looks really nice. It looks really smart. It's the one I've got in the graphic there as well. And this is a brand new bottle of Laphroaig. So I bought another one of these, despite having quite a lot of that left, because this was on offer. It was very inexpensive. It was 30 quid. 30 quid for a 10-year-old Islay malt whiskey is arguably too cheap. Uh-oh. No, it worked. We've got a wobbly cork here. This cork is ready to tear, or it's ready to separate from the wooden top. That's all that's going to potentially happen. I need to be careful with that. Right, this is yep. Let's get this in. So we're at position 8 now. I think position 8. Laphroaig. I should have numbered these, right? Four, three, two, one. So a wee half pour again of this Islay. You can smell it's 40% ABV, 10-year-old Laphroaig, but just the aroma in the room. You know, sometimes I have peat blight and I struggle to pick up peat smoke. Not tonight. I've just opened this and suddenly it smells like somebody's lit a bonfire. Yeah, if you stick your nose in, you smell past that kind of smoke. The smoke's much more kind of out here. If you stick your nose in a glass, there's a nice kind of rock pool, a minerally thing. I know that a lot of American nosing and tasting notes immediately go to medicinal, much more medicinal, like TCP and Band-Aids and all of these kind of notes and things. And I kind of get that. There is a TCP element here, but for me, there's also a wee bit of a kind of medicinal iodine type, the thing that would stain your fingers yellow. But there's a nice salt to it. There's fruit here as well, quite ripe. Quite aromatic, actually, like a nice ripe melon, maybe. And really quite earthy. Damp compost soil type notes too. Wow. Again, nose is really quite expressive, quite accessible, really quite enjoyable. And then the palate arrives and you're like, oh, this is suffering a wee bit here. What I was hoping for everything that the nose was going to bring, the arrival is really, really quite flat. It's quite linear. You would even, it even tastes less than 40%. Let's give it a go. That's so disappointing. So disappointing. I'm going to go back ever so quickly in front of you guys. I've got a couple of spare glasses off to the side. I'm going to pour the one that's been open for a wee while because I don't remember it being quite as flat as that. Interesting to note that the new cork is wooden by the looks of it, and the old ones were these kind of white plastic ones. Just a wee side note. Just a wee teaspoon of that. We're not doing old versus now, but be careful with the cork in this one. But since we've got this was one of the really old Laphroaigs with the duck egg blue foil seal at the top. Not really old, but probably 20 years ago now. And a wee teaspoon of that too. The contemporary one, it just noses so well. It's almost like Islay flavoured whiskey water. It's so. This is an enthusiast speaking, of course. This noses, the kind of fairly recent one noses much more minerally, much more kind of pebbles and seashore and rock. Big difference, crazy difference. What is happening? There's actually weight here, a wee bit of texture. It's not particularly communicative. It's still a wee bit flat. It's not particularly jaggy or grippy or fizzy. But there's more to it. There's much more to it. And it's hanging around a bit longer as well. And that bottle is only 2 or 3 years old. I don't know. Let's go to the really old one, the 20-year-old one. So 20 years ago, 10-year-old product, it would have been distilled in the early 90s. Back when there was plenty stock around and not a lot of people wanted it. Sawdust. Bookstore, damp bookstore. Fusty, old. Nose, kind of a winey grape note too. Bright yellow fruit. Maybe even a wee bit, maybe not tropical, but let's go with kind of a pineapple-y mango mix. Old whiskey, taste of old whiskey. You can taste the old. It's not all bottle effect. It's not kind of wet cardboard and mushroom and things. It's an old kind of elegance to it. It's a wee bit flat still. I think that is also 40% ABV. It is. They're all 40%. Still quite flat, not very communicative. The kind of middle one was the most kind of alive and effervescent. Go back to the contemporary one. Wow, this is just you would. Honestly, I refuse to believe that's even 40%. It's incredible how just linear and flat that is, despite nosing. Really quite nice on the nose. I mean, if somebody came in and brand new in, just in the door, wanted to kind of get a handle on what Islay was about and the flavors and the things, they could get it from this. They really could. But they're not going to get the full experience. They're not going to get the texture, not going to get the oiliness. They're not going to get the weight of the spirit. Remarkable difference in just 2 or 3 years. I don't know what that's about. Listen, it's Scotch malt whiskey. By definition, it's a batch-made product. It has to be made in batches. It has to be matured in individual little casks that can only hold up to, well, typically only 2 or 250 casks, barrel to hogshead, 250 litres, barrel to hogshead. But even if it's a big cask, it can't be any bigger than 700 litres legally. So it tends to be maybe, if it's a special cask, 500 litre sherry cask or something like that. So we're talking about a batch-made product that's matured in even smaller batches, right? And then it's the job of a blender to kind of put that together for every outturn, every time they do a bottling, to make it the same each time. It's difficult to do that with consistency. They've got tools and things, but generally with deep enough stock, a big enough distillery, it should be doable. I suspect that this whiskey is like this right now purely because of cost pressures and cost constraints. And that's a wee shame, because Laphroaig is one of the most unique spirits on the planet. Martin Fielder has bought me a dram for you for tasting my entry to the whiskey world and why I love it, Laphroaig 10. I suspect, Martin, that you could still have it as your gateway whiskey into the whiskey world now, but the percentage points of the chances of that happening have been chipped away. I suspect when you came in, Martin, it was probably a wee bit more a compelling product. That said, I'll raise this dram to you and say thank you very much for your dram, since I've sipped the last of that. No, I've got the Laphroaigs over here. I'll sip the good one. And I'll thank you for your dram. Cheers, Martin. My pal Graham Fraser is celebrating being a member for 50 months. Thank you, Graham, for all your support. Wow, 50 already. Great being a barfly for so long. It's great having you as part of the barfly community for so long as well, my friend. And Jimmy Legacy, when the quarter cask Laphroaig came out, it severely pointed out how bad that 10-year-old 40% Laphroaig was. When the quarter cask first arrived, they had a wee bit more flexibility and a wee bit more kind of stock profile that they could have brought to make that quarter cask quite compelling. I've got a quarter cask on the shelf, but it's been a wee while since I've dipped into it. We'll keep it to the core range tonight, buddy, but I hear exactly what you're saying. Jimmy Legg, thank you very much for your dram. Cheers. As always, big guy. Donald Pass Whiskey is here. Good to see you, Tim. And Simon Jones is saying, Aquavita, I've experienced a fair amount of batch variation in many recent Laphroaigs. Some have been great, some very flat. I have unfortunately got a very flat one tonight, buddy. David is saying, David Larenko, good to see you, David, from Portugal. Just pop in to give my like and we'll catch and replay. If Laphroaig is in, I'm happy already. Always get a coconut water and mint. Wow. Quarter cask is better, but all we need to breathe is, but all need to breathe for weeks. Oh, wow. Just by the mere power of suggestion on the nose. The coconut and mint on the older one, a wee bit less so. A wee bit less so. Nosing an empty glass still works. Okay, Laphroaig, position 8. We need to motor on. I've got 10 whiskies to get through tonight, right? Okay, so what's coming up in position 7? This is a surprise. If I went back to, I got some figures from ScotchWhisky.com article from 2017, and this whiskey didn't appear in the top 10 at all, and yet now it's at position 7. And when you consider this, lots of things start to make a lot of sense. I have to share with you, sorry, how many bottles Laphroaig managed to get through first. Laphroaig, 4.5 million bottles of Laphroaig are sold every year. Could be up a wee bit, could be down a wee bit based on 2022 figures, but quite incredible to think. Those figures are going to grow somewhat as we get through the top 10 tonight. But as I say, this bottle, this distillery didn't exist in the top 10 until very recently. And that's when things start dropping into place. That's when things start to become explainable. Can anyone guess who I'm talking about? I'm talking about Talisker. I've got 2 bottles of Talisker here in front of me tonight. I don't think I'm going to do a comparison tonight. The one is this newer one is darker. It's only a notch darker. I don't know if the camera can pick up that it's darker. Maybe if I got some white paper or card behind them. When we talk about adding colour for consistency, no, I don't think that's going to work at all. You just have to take my word for it. I thought it was the daylight earlier today when I was picking these bottles out that the newer one looked just a notch darker, but I can see it clearly in this light tonight. Anyway, what we have here is the previous branding that's been on the shelves for a couple of years now. I picked this up when it was for offer and put it aside for whatever purpose. Never got round to opening it. And here we have the much more modern branding here. Now, a lot of people don't like the modern branding. I'm not offended by it, but I have always been a fan of the kind of classic Diageo branding. Look at the state of my camera tonight and the way it's all over the place. Give it a minute to catch up. I quite enjoy the old kind of traditional, straightforward, direct, warm, fuzzy feeling Diageo branding. I like it. I don't think they needed to jazz things up a wee bit. That said, I'm not offended by this. I quite like how they've got the coastline incorporated here, and I quite like that it's just still feels a little bit like Talisker, albeit jazzed up a bit. What I am not, I'm just intrigued by is that they've decided to add a strapline to this new branding. And this is very telling. It says, from the oldest distillery on the Isle of Skye. That kind of reads as like they're feeling a wee bit of needle from Laphroaig popping up on their island, right? I don't think they need to. I don't think they need to talk about being the oldest distillery on the Isle of Skye. It's just that all they're doing is drawing attention to the fact that there are other distilleries on the Isle of Skye now. It's a strange thing for them to put on the label. That said, it still has the age-old kind of Talisker strapline of Made by the Sea, which is on this one too. 45.8% ABV. So this is the highest ABV in our 10 whiskey lineup tonight. Which one to open? I'm going to stick with the theme, and I'm going to open the contemporary one. If you were going out to buy Talisker right now, this is the one that you would buy. And if you went out to buy Talisker 10 right now, you'd probably pay somewhere in the order of £34 to £39. However, Talisker 10 is often on ridiculously cheap offers all over the place. And I recently saw Talisker 10 for sale at £26 a bottle. I didn't buy it. I paid $34 for this one. We're at position, let's hold it up, 7. It's very, this is almost the colour of Iron Brew. In the glass especially, you notice just how orange it is. I don't know if the camera is going to pick that up, but let me tell you, to the eye tonight, we've got Iron Brew orange. Looking for Pete. On the back of that Laphroaig, I might struggle a wee bit. Pete Blight kicks in, right? Talisker for me always had a wonderfully salt and pepper nose and a salt and pepper experience on the palate too. Especially on the finish, there was a dryness, almost like a cough sweet or something would just make itself very apparent on the finish. It's not nosing like this tonight at all. There's a bit of a coastal element here, so the salinity, sure, I can get on board with that. But what's overriding that is a kind of caramel, toffee sweetness, almost like a Werther's Original or a butterscotch type sweetness. Vanilla, Scottish tablet. Wow, so tablet-like. So all these notes are very sweet, right? This is nosing sweet. It's not what you would expect from a Talisker. Wee bit of orange oil. Perhaps a power of suggestion by the orangey liquid. Oh wait, no, but it's a wee bit orangey. Okay, big surprise, and it's a good thing. It's a good surprise. It's okay, and it makes sense when you stop to think about it for a second, how it could be. The first 3 drams I've had tonight, the Glen Grant, the Aberlour, and that Laphroaig, all nosed very, very well. But then the palate let you down. This was nosing fine. It was nosing reasonably well. I didn't nose particularly like a Talisker. But as it arrived on the palate, there was just a pop of flavour and positive, good vibes that I didn't expect. Clearly, 45.8% ABV. Now, it's still chill filtered. It's still coloured, despite that higher ABV. That's not what we're getting. What we're getting here, I think, is just a wee bit more flavour being conveyed through the higher ABV. That flatness isn't allowed to betray the ABV because it's been preserved a little bit. The flavour's been preserved. The structure of the whiskey's been preserved. There is a bit of a pepperiness through there on the finish, especially. But I'm looking for that Talisker kind of goodbye as it kind of goes down. You've got that kind of dry thing. It's almost like a kind of barley sugar pepper thing on the finish. A dryness. This is a sweeter expression of Talisker, this 10-year-old. First fill bourbon cask type in style. Okay, now I'm getting a wee bit of a smoke, but it's not like peat smoke. It's like fireside smoke. Wee bit of char and things like that. This is actually, given the company I've sipped it in tonight so far, this is actually a dram that I could sit with. I think there is a wee bit of a emulsified nature going on, a wee bit of a saccharine thing on the finish. But it's alive. There's much more life here, much more vibrance. The flavour spectrum has just been kind of pushed a little bit. It can't be a coincidence. It's got to be down to the ABV. Now, this is interesting that there's so much of this around and it's so kind of inexpensive right now. There's lots of non-age statements to take the cheaper price points. The Storm is a wee bit cheaper or similar price. Then Sky is cheaper. You've got Dark Storm. You've got duty-free Surge, which is actually a decent wee pour. I've not had a bottle of it yet, but Talisker Surge was okay. The Talisker Parley that I've got on the shelf right now, I bought a backup bottle of that. It's not going to be around forever. A good Talisker for the price I got it at. I bought it on offer, direct from Diageo, believe it or not. The best Talisker you can buy contemporary, it's not available all the time. It's going to be quite scarce now. 57 North, a cracker. Fantastic Talisker. Higher ABV, 57% ABV. Then you've got the Port Rouy out there with the port cask finish. There's lots of choice from Talisker right now. The theme, they're all young. They're all relatively young. And the only one that has an age statement on it is the 10-year-old. If you go to the 18-year-old, you go from kind of inexpensive, affordable whiskies to ridiculously overpriced whiskies. Why? I suspect because the more lucrative model to most of these producers is to sell a lot of the whiskies stacked high and sold cheap at a younger age. And if they have to hold on to their stocks and they're not able to do that, they're not able to cash in on that liquid at a younger age, they're going to charge us for it when it reaches that much more mature age and price point. That seems to be the way of it today. Talisker 10, despite what I've said, it's probably the most engaging sip that I've had tonight so far. How many bottles are sold of Talisker? I can tell you that they sell 4.6 million, around the same as Laphroaig. So you can see that Laphroaig and Talisker probably over the years are trading places, the recent years. This is a new entry in the top 10. Why? Because of the success of selling cheaper Taliskers. Entry-level whiskies seem to be where it's at. I forgot to like those drams that were purchased for me earlier. I'll do that now. Craig McGinn, good to see you, Craig. Aquavita, evening, Roy, Craig and Jennifer. Regular viewers from Kilmacombe enjoying tonight's theme before we head to our wedding on Saturday in Ely. My goodness. Craig, I need to have something better. Where's that good dram? Where's that one I poured? Here it is here. There's only a wee drip left in it. I'll pour some more later. For somebody that's getting married at the weekend, one of the best days of your life. I hope it works out for you, Craig. It's an amazing thing to be in a room where everybody's there to celebrate what's happening, right? Celebrate what you've done. But I hope it goes great for you down in Ely. Thanks for dropping in and thanks for the dram. Congratulations. All right, we move on and we go to position number 6. This is not the most recent branding, and it's the only one I think that I don't have the most recent branding for. And the reason is this is a wee bit expensive now. Back in the day when I purchased this, I got this for buttons. I picked this up for £25. Not a chance that you'd be able to get it for that now, but it was one of these kind of sales. It was one of these kind of on-offer things, and this is a good wee whiskey to have on hand. It's good to open and drink, but it's also pretty good to gift to people too. And I noticed that it doesn't have a tear strip, or does it? Oh no, it does. It does have a tear strip. Some of you might be able to recognize by the shape of the bottle top here. All of this is coming off. Look, it can all come off. And for those of you who don't, you'll be able to see that it's established in, cover my face. Come on. 1892. What I'm about to open for position number 6. Oh, this is going to pop. Good, confident pop. We should get a nice glug. Oh, just a wee bit more. Quite a nice dark colour here. But again, we don't know that it's natural, so it's a moot point. It's completely redundant talking about it. 40% ABV. I'm, of course, talking about one of the most famous Scotch single malt whiskies out there, Balvenie's Doublewood. This is the 12-year-old Doublewood. The original, back in the 80s, Dave Stewart created this kind of dual maturation. Matured in 2 distinct casks, of course. So he's kind of given us this bourbon and this sherry combo. Further maturation in European oak sherry casks. It increases complexity, bringing fruity, honeyed depths to the resulting single malt. In the original cask, they're going to be talking about many years of maturation exclusively in traditional whiskey casks, mellows the maturing spirit and imparts gentle, warming layers of vanilla spiciness. So when they talk about something as generic as that, maturing in traditional whiskey oak casks, they're going to be talking about some first fill bourbon, some refill bourbon, some second fill, third fill. They're going to be talking about hogsheads. They're going to be talking about just oak casks, whatever the distilleries are filling. And then, obviously, for the double wood expression, they're going to be finishing specifically in European oak sherry casks. Now, it's not just that it's a sherry cask finish. The crucial thing here is that it's European oak. Completely different interaction with the spirit than American oak. American oak is more kind of broad brush. You would be talking about caramel sweetness, vanilla, coconut, that type of thing. Whereas European oak can be much more spicy, dark red fruits, more autumnal, that type of thing. Also a little bit more tannic and drying. But that's what the Balvenie has been doing. And it was one of the first, if not the first, it was certainly the first ubiquitous or large-scale mass market release that embraced that idea of further maturation in a different cask. This, I have to caveat this, what I'm just about to assess this whiskey. We've talked about batch variation. This one I've had on the shelf for 8 years. Really, it could be that long. It's been a long, long time. It's just never had its moment until now. But this is by far the most expressive on the nose. Really quite bold and characterful. Nutty, woody, spicy, cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, hazelnut, caramel, kind of a sweet, syrupy fruit like lychee, something like this. Or maybe peaches, apricots and syrup, that type of thing. Certainly stone fruit. Wee bit of orange and orange oil. Lots of complexity just popping out the glass. Quite incredible at 40%. Great nose, great nose. You almost feel like it's a kind of, it's leveled up a little bit here. There's a notch up. There's an added layer of kind of decadence. There's a VIP feel to this dram on the nose. At 40%, let's see how it does on the palate. Thank you, Ben, Whiskey with Molly. Oh, wow. For reminding me to change, to keep myself up to speed with what's happening on screen. We're now on Balvenie. No way I would suggest this is a 40% whiskey. This feels like at least 43, but I might even go as far to suggest it tastes like a 46. There's a richness to this. There's a bit more body, a bit more weight to this. I suspect that if I picked up a Balvenie 12 today, of course it's going to be a wee bit different. It's certainly going to be a lot more expensive. I'd probably have to pay twice as much as I paid for this one. 25, I got this on offer, as I say. Today it's about 45, 46 to into the early 50s for this double wood. But this is the best dram I've had so far. Hands down, the best dram. Flavour, complexity, depth, richness. It is light on the palate. It's designed for the market that it's going to be received by, definitely, but it's got more than everything I've had, including that higher ABV Talisker. This is a pretty wee bottle of whiskey, I have to be honest. Very good. Very bloody good. I looked up the price. If you had to buy this today, well, you can buy it online for 45 quid. There are cheaper places out there. But my goodness. Oh, I see the red. A big flash of red has come in. Let's build up to that. Ebhead, my pal from Norway. Good to see you, buddy. Celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 51 months. Tremendous. Barfly number 1, because he founded Well, it's between him and Aaron McFault, who's Barfly #1, right? They were both around at the same time right at the start, but Rolfie founded the Aquaviti Barflies page. Chat GPT tells me that November 18 is 67 months ago. It's lovely to see Rolfie embracing Chat GPT for his lazy brain as well. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you for the drama. And MJ Rodden is here too, celebrating being a member for 22 months. Seeing Aquaviti Balvenie 12 Doublewood with my gateway drama. I suspect, MJ Rodden, there's going to be a lot of gateway drams shared tonight, and I think hopefully I'm able to make a succinct point about that at the end of the night tonight as well. Danny Keenan, my pal Danny's in here, bought me a generous ram to say unfortunately got about it, is currently at work, cheating again, Danny. We'll catch the rest on replay. Cheers, Roy and everyone. Danny, MJ Rodden, and my pal Rolfie from Norway, thank you very much for your support. Cheers to you all. And Wick has dropped in. It's so good to have you here, Wick. So good to have your support. Silent in the background as ever, quietly just watching and taking things in. But your generosity is always unthinkable. It's difficult for me to work out how to best respond to it sometimes as well, buddy. But I will with a raised glass and gratitude. Not a comment, nothing to say. 50 gifted memberships as well. Thank you for your generosity. Sláinte. So Balvenie is pretty rock solid in terms of how much it sells. It's a good dram. It's an easy VIP. If you were looking for just, if you had somebody coming into the house, they're not kind of whiskey drinkers, they're not really, I'm just kind of, I like whiskey, but if you wanted something safe to pour them, something they could recognize when they leave you and go off into the world and explore for themselves, this would be easy to recommend. This is quite a lovely, lovely wee dram tonight, in the company that I'm sipping it in tonight. Quite impressed. I will caveat with the fact that it's been on the shelf for quite a number of years. But that's the best so far by some way. And Balvenie sell 5.3 million bottles of whiskey a year. And these days, none of it is particularly cheap. Balvenie have done a good job of moving out of that kind of supermarket kind of budget price banding and moving into something that's seen as a bit more premium. I also think they've done it in quite a canny way. If I was to recommend a Balvenie, keep your eyes open for the 17-year-old Peat Week. It's a belter, and I was able to pick that one up on offer. I've finished that wee dram of Balvenie, but that's okay because there's something else to move on to. But what I'm going to do is Scotland is saying was gifted a Balvenie rum cask and really enjoyed it. I was going to mention that one. That's the 14-year-old, the Caribbean rum cask. I remember that being a supermarket whiskey when it first came out, but now it's a bit more expensive and harder to get hold of. The thing about that is a wee bit like the Doublewood being one of the first of its type. That Caribbean rum cask was one of the first expressions to really push that kind of tropical rum flavour profile forward. And it won a lot of hearts doing it as well. A bit more expensive now, not as easy to get a hold of as it once was, but it's still it's ubiquitous. I use that word a lot, don't I? It's very common. Donner Pass Whiskey Tim is saying Balvenie 12 is quite often the nice selection at generic bars in the US. I would have to agree, Tim. And Ebhead Rolfie is saying, but the Balvenie did decide that they are a premium malt, didn't they? Macallan prices. Not quite Macallan prices. Not quite there yet. We're going to get a chance to talk about that and prove it a wee bit later, Rolfie. Falsgraph is saying that 15-year-old Peat Week, I see at 154.50 euros, a bit steep, isn't it? Well, I paid for my 17-year-old, I don't remember what I paid now, but I got it at a very, very good price. I paid, I think, about 80-something pounds, going from memory. And I think it's one of the, I would put it ahead of the 17 Portwood, certainly. I would maybe put it ahead of the 21-year-old Portwood as well. That 17-year-old Peat Week up there is a darling bottle for me. Love it. Higher ABV as well. Let's split things up now. Now that I've shared with you what the Balvenie sold in terms of volume, let's take that down for a second and split it. I'm going to focus tonight on the 10 top-selling global single malt whiskies. But there is a pretender in the mix. There is something that's made it into the top 10 right in the center, splitting the top 10 to the point that it's forced me to go for a top 11. So that when I was talking about that Glen Grant and that Dalmore exchanging blows for the top 10, I'm actually talking about position 11 because there is a pretender in the mix as well. There is a bottle that is not a single malt, but it is made up of Scotch single malts, and it has become one of the most familiar brands globally in the space of a decade. It's a cult following. It's done an amazing job. It's by the same company that owns Balvenie, and you know what I'm talking about. 40% ABV, I believe it's 43 in the States, of course it is. I'm speaking about the Monkey Shoulder. Always on offer, despite the fact that it's got these metal monkeys glued quite firmly onto the shoulder there, often coming in quite elaborate packaging and promotional packaging and things like that as well. It's got a wee tear strip poking out here, and it's been a long time since I've had a Monkey Shoulder on the shelf. The last time I had a Monkey Shoulder, now correct me if I'm getting this wrong, got a miscount happening here. I need to keep this in check. No, I need an extra glass for this one because it's splitting the mix, of course. It's not one of the top 10. This is an 11th dram, but I want you to take note of how little I'm pouring of all of these. I'll still be very happy by the end of the evening, don't get me wrong. When I originally, or when I think I last had this on the shelf, I'm fairly sure it was known as a triple malt. But I see that they don't have this written on the label here. There's some smaller font, some smaller typeface that I would have to take some time to read. There's a wee bit on the back as well. Okay. The reason they called it triple malt is they used to have Glenfiddich. It's owned by Grant's. Glenfiddich, Balvenie, and Glenlivet in the mix, all Speyside. So it was a Speyside blended malt whiskey. They very, very quickly dropped to the language on that, and they moved to just calling it, as it's called today, blended malt Scotch whiskey. Batch 27. Every batch that they've ever released has been batch 27 because the batch 27 referred to a flavour profile, a style, something that was released out there, rather than an official batch. Honey. Vanilla honey. Great nose, lovely nose. Inviting, soft. A wee bit of almost a kind of tannic richness, maybe. You can always suspect it was like almost like a port or sherry type like to this. I don't believe that there is at all. But it's nosing rich. This is a very inexpensive whiskey, typically, often on offer, regularly. I remember back in the day, we could pick this up at 17 or 18 pounds. These days, maybe the cheapest if it's ever going to drop to is 24, 25, 26 pounds. But very inexpensive. And it was always punching above its price point. It was always doing really well. It's quite complex here. The tannic thing is maybe a kind of wood thing, a wood spice thing, rather than port sherry. Okay, let's go for a wee sip. I'm not quite sure it can step up and grasp and climb above that Balvenie that I've just sipped. However, the taste experience from this, forget the fact it's chill filtered, it's malt whiskey, it is chill filtered, forget the fact it's coloured, the taste experience from that wee sip for as inexpensive as it is, that is just an inspired bottle of whiskey. There is no surprise to me that it sits ahead in terms of sales than everything I've shared with you so far. It's not going to appear on screen tonight, but I can tell you that Monkey Shoulder, the Balvenie was 5.3 million bottles of Balvenie. All Balvenies are sold. Grants have pulled off a blinder with this. Monkey Shoulder on its own. Okay, there's a Smoky Monkey as well, which would count in this figure, but Monkey Shoulder on its own, 8.4 million bottles a year. It is malt whiskey, but it's not in my top 10 tonight because I'm focused on single malts. This is a wee bonus dram 11 if you like, and I have to say it's pretty tasty. It's not going to get everybody excited. It's not going to set the world alight. It's not going to have everybody holding it as the best whiskey they've ever, but it's always just going to be, aye, okay, that's good. That's a good sip. And I think it's going to be a fairly potent gateway whiskey as well. Monkey Shoulder, €27, and the Smoky Monkey, €33. Interesting that this seems the same amount as in British pounds. I have to say that's probably spot on, Falsgraf. I think it's right. Maybe it's a wee bit more expensive here now. I bought this Monkey Shoulder very recently. What did I pay? Hopefully I've written it down what I paid. I paid £24 for it. Wow. So it's still very inexpensive here. Now, I would have been shopping around because the exercise tonight is to try and plug the gaps that I had with the most inexpensive whiskies possible. So there we go, Monkey Shoulder. I have to put this in a very specific place. So remember, let's put it at the back there. So I know what's what as we move on to the next clean glass that's about to get a dram in it. And here's where we get to the point of cheating somewhat. It's not cheating. It's not cheating at all. But where everything that we've had up till tonight, with the exception of the blended malt, and everything that we're going to have beyond this dram I'm going to share with you now is a product of a single distillery. It's this single malt, and it's a product of a single spot. Now, that's true with the bottle I'm just about to share with you, but the brand, that is not true to say that of. You probably know what I'm going to uncork now. It's been a long time since this has been on any shelf in the vPub. I think the last one I had was either a Sunray or a, one of those non-age statement special editions from this. Yeah, but this has been rebranded since. It's still got that really, really narrow bottle, a hip flask, almost kind of tombstone type shaped bottle. This is Diageo's attempt to compete with the big boys. With the big boys, I'm talking about the top sellers. And this is the biggest selling single malt Diageo brand. I say brand because it's not actually the biggest selling single malt. No glug from that. If I'd poured it sideways, maybe like this, rather than flat like that, it would have probably glugged a wee bit. Let's try again. Let's get a glug. This is the vPub. If there's a glug to be had, we'll get it, right? There we go. And I pour a wee bit less of it too. It's very dark. It's quite a dark colour, this, isn't it? Judicious use. I'll avoid that word in future, I think, of caramel colouring, I would suggest. It's 12 years old. It might not necessarily be so. They're calling this the Singleton. Now, the Singleton is 3 distilleries, so it can be Glenord, it can be Glendullan, it can be Dufton, and you have to look a wee bit closer for the distillery to be revealed. If I show you here on the label, it just says the Singleton, 12 years, luscious nectar apparently. Go down here, Dufton Distillery. You can see it down underneath. This is the Singleton of Dufton. So if you pick up another one, slightly different branding, it'll say Singleton of Glenord or the Singleton of Glendullan. It used to be market specific. They would distribute different distilleries to different markets, but that's a wee bit more it's a wee bit more mixed these days. We can see Glendullan in our shops, and occasionally when we're really lucky, we can see Glenord. Again, this noses very nicely, very nicely. Cooked apple and pastry. Cinnamon, burnt sugars, caramels. A kind of, yeah, toffee syrup. Quite rich. Actually, a really, really lovely, lovely nose. Much more here, much more pleasure here than you might expect from the cheapest whiskey I'm going to share with you tonight. And this was not just cheapest, I shopped around and picked it up. This was the cheapest whiskey in most places I was looking for these. And I picked this up without any effort at all for £27. The only thing that's cheaper than it is that Monkey Shoulder, the blended malt. Okay, let's have a wee sip because it's nosing quite nicely. Why am I doing this tonight? Why am I sitting here with sipping whiskies that you guys are not really that interested in? Why am I sipping whiskies that you're very unlikely to buy? Well, because the alternative was that I was going to be talking about doom and gloom tonight. I was going to do a session, a vPub on whiskey fatigue, because I was feeling just a bit whiskied out. I was walking into the vPub and I was thinking, right, okay, shall I have a dram? What needs tasting? What needs a bit of kind of what am I feeling a bit distant from? What do I need to get my head around? I just couldn't. I wasn't motivated. I wasn't excited about having a wee dram of whiskey. Whiskey fatigue is real. Another thing that's very real and perhaps just as dangerous is whiskey snobbery. And we all suffer from it. We really, really do. And sometimes we need to be in company with people who like whiskey, but not at a level that we do, to realize just how far our runaway whiskey train has gone. The whiskies that they love and get excited about, we can immediately feel this kind of dark kind of dread of tedium dropping over us. And the problem is not with their perspectives of whiskey. The problem is with our perspectives of whiskey. Our privilege has run amok. We are not spending £25 on a bottle of whiskey anymore. We are spending £75, £125 more occasionally. What we need to do occasionally, especially when that privilege, when that overexposure to remarkable, powerful, intense, dense, gorgeous, wonderful liquids is making us a bit fatigued, we need to step out. We need to step back. We need to reset. If you can take a break, take a break. As long as you need for that fire to come back again, for that inspiration to come back again, for that love and passion to reappear. If you can't take a break because you're in the industry, because you have a lot of commitments, it's going to involve you being in whiskey environments, clubs and gatherings and all that kind of thing, you need a change. A change is as good as a break. Pour yourself a gin and tonic like Justin Wan. Pour yourself a whiskey highball like Shelton Almeida. Maybe go back to the whiskies that you were exploring when you first stepped into the whiskey bubble, whatever they were. Now, maybe you stepped in at a very, very high level, but most of us stepped in at the points that we felt comfortable exploring. The things that were accessible, the things that were soft and of accessible ABVs, and the things that were affordable, financially accessible too. Go back to one of those, two of those, three of those. Don't do what I've done tonight and buy the top 10. Go back to those. Why? Because what it's done for me and I suspect after sipping all 10 of them tonight, it's going to reinforce that, is it has made me realize just how privileged we actually are. In between, maybe not in between the Limburg Festival, but around that time, Limburg and the few weeks running up to the Campbelltown Festival, there was a few points where I felt in a bit of a whiskey fug. I was just kind of like not motivated, and it meant that coming up with topics for the vPub and talking about things, it meant that everything was harder. And I decided I needed to find a way to crowbar in a break, to time, to reset. And I realized that was going to be hard because of what I do, the life choices that I've made. So I did this, and I started to go back to some of the things that I've originally come into the scene for. Lagavulin 16, a wee sip of that. Glengoyne 10, a wee sip of that. Talisker 10, a wee sip of that. Then that immediately blew open my perspective again. How dare I become fatigued because I have utter privilege at my feet? The best whiskies of today, the best contemporary whiskey, the most natural whiskey, the cutting edge, the most innovative, the most flavour forward. What really got me into whiskey, what made me collapse, what made me shocked at that, the product that is made here, were whiskies like this. That is why I'm doing this tonight. This, it doesn't take the Balvenie, it doesn't even take the monkey shoulder, but it's a very, very good dram. This is the cheapest dram. £27. And Singleton, across Glenord, Glendullan and Dufton, sell 9 million bottles a year. Yes, you could argue that they're cheating because they're using 3 distilleries to do that, but that's the strategy for Diageo. The branding is the Singleton, and that 9 million bottles is for Singleton whiskies. But despite that cheating, despite that using 3 distilleries for one brand, they are still at position number 5. We've got 4 more whiskies to share tonight. And at number 4, it's one of my absolute favourites. Justin Wan is saying, well said, it's hard to go back to our first few months of a journey and experience whiskey again. If it's inexpensive and there's low risk, Justin, it's not hard. We just need to have the gumption to go out and do it, right? Mikey Hayes in tonight. Good to see you, Mikey. Rico Donert is here tonight. So good to see you, Rico. Helen is saying, no snobbery here. Just know that what we like. Still spend 20 to 30 quid on a good dram. Cutty Sark Prohibition, McLean's Nose, etc. comes to mind. Fantastic. 2 blends that Helen's talking about there, and also 2 higher ABV products too. The McLean's Nose is 46. Cutty Sark Prohibition is at 50% ABV. She knows what she likes. Andy knows what he likes. They know how to get that thing out of the product. I'm quite surprised, I think, when we go back to the lower ABV stuff, how we can struggle to get that experience out of it because we've climbed so high up the ABV ladder. Roland is here. Good to see you, Roland. My pal Whiskey Radar, I've lost your comment, but I'll find it, Roland. Here you are. I bought this a couple of years ago for an Aquavitae blind tasting at €18. It did quite well in the lineup. It was not identified as a budget whiskey. It's actually tasting quite good tonight. Brian Stormont, good to see you, Brian. He's saying good shout out on making a change. Aquavitae. I had a gin sample last night that reinvigorated my taste buds with its freshness. Brian, it's spot on. It's exactly my point of tonight. And I don't speak to you from a point of trying to preach. I'm speaking to you from the perspective of I felt this. Justin Wan is saying I would be interested to put all 3 Singletons on a side-by-side. I've never done it, Justin, but I would like to do it. I am drawn to Glenord because of my experience of Glenord. So I think I would favourite that at the outset. I don't know if it would stand up to it. Julian Rickman is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 25 months. Julian, thank you so much. You let us know how good our integrity malts are. I think this wee exercise would do that too, Justin. Thank you very much for your support. Cheers. Anthony Lambert is saying, I just recently bought my first Campbellton Loch blended malt for €39. Fantastic dram, and not just because of the price. Love it. Doesn't have to cost the world. Campbellton Loch. No argument here, Anthony. A perfect dram, perfect value for money blended malt whiskey. Sachin is saying, I always have a non-whiskey open all the time, like a cognac, armagnac, or rum. Again, on a similar theme, Sachin, it makes perfect sense. And Falsgraf is saying, around the time I joined the vPub first, I was a fan of the Deveron, also from Dufton. That's right. The Deveron is actually Macduff. Is that? Yes, sorry. So Macduff, it's not from Dufton. I think you're getting confused with Dufton there. Macduff is actually a Highland, an Eastern Highland, Falsgraf. But the best place to buy the Deveron is when it's called Glendeveron from Duty Free. Whiskey with Molly saying Glenmorangie, Glenlivet, Jura, and Macallan to come. Ooh, I like the game you're playing. I like the game you're playing, Ben. You're right on most of those. Here's my favourite. It's in the glass right now. It's the one I poured as I was setting up tonight. Just have a wee nose and a wee play. Get myself set up. Every time I smell this, if you poured this for me blind, probably I wouldn't. But because I'm looking for it, because I feel it, because it's part of the experience, I go in and I'm always looking for pineapple. And pineapple is here tonight. Fresh pineapple, yes, but mostly confectionery pineapple, like pineapple cubes. So I'll share with you, if you've been around the vPub for long enough, you know what I'm talking about. The Glen of Tranquility, Glenmorangie's 10-year-old, position number 4 on the top 10 best-selling charts, 40% ABV. But make no mistake, despite the low ABV, this bottle is the keystone, the cornerstone, the rock, the thing that everything that Glenmorangie do is built around. This is one of the very few whiskies, in fact, maybe the only whiskey in the lineup tonight that is exclusively known to be ex-bourbon matured, or whether it's first fill or refill bourbon. I love the stuff. A bit like somebody mentioned earlier on, I think it was Donner Pass Tim was talking about having a safe whiskey behind the bar in the Balvenie. If I go to a bar and it's just got the kind of ubiquitous everyday mass market drams and I see the orange label of Glenmorangie and I'm in the mood for a whiskey, I know that it's a safe harbour. 10 years old. It says on the label here, aged in bourbon casks. 40% ABV. It's got a little award-winning gold star on it. I don't know what that's from. Double gold someplace. Deliciously. It's so important I can't even read the tiny font. See if the camera's got a better chance of picking that up. Award, schmaward, right? There's only one awards that actually counts, and you know what that is. I've always loved this. It's a perma-shelf bottle for me. I've always got a bottle, to the point that I've actually got multiple generations. I've got some from the 70s, some from the 80s, some from the 90s, and I've got some contemporary bottles as well of Glenmorangie 10. I just get on very, very well with the stuff, and it treats me well. It's light. There's virtually no alcohol there to my detection whatsoever tonight. But it's very fruity, very estery. It's just summery and outdoorsy and clean and slightly sweet, but not sickly sweet, fresh. Wee bit tropical even. Pineapple cubes thing kicking in again, probably. Nice finish. Not saccharine sweet, just a nice, good product. And I'm also suspicious that this is natural colour. They don't put it on the label, so we can't take it that it's natural colour, but I believe that this Glenmorangie 10 is natural colour. Perhaps not, probably not even. This is position number 4. And Glenmorangie does very, very well in terms of sales. If I can find the number, I probably need to go to the next one. I have to tell you what number 3 is. It doesn't look like all my pictures have uploaded, which is a bit of a frustration. It doesn't matter. When I pick up the next one, I'll be able to tell you. I'm going to move on to number 3 at the same time I share with you the numbers for Glenmorangie. And number 3 is, Macallan. As we move from the Singletons, 3 distilleries of 9 million, just 1 distillery in the Highlands, Glenmorangie, one of only 2 in the Highlands, the other one being Talisker tonight, 9.1 million, just pips the Singleton. They're probably going to be trading places over time. As we move into the big, the bad, the awful, the scary, the luxury, the whatever it may be, Macallan. Now, you might remember why I've got a bottle of Macallan on hand, because I did a project 2 years ago trying to replace our favourites. Lagavulin 12 cast strength was one, I think. Macallan 12 was another. And Talisker 18 was the other one. So we're trying to find much cheaper alternatives for those. And we did a decent job, I think. It was a guest show with some other collaborators. It's good wee vPub. Macallan 12, no spoilers, was beaten by the 6-year-old Thompson Brothers blended Scotch whisky. And it was beaten by the whiskies that I was sipping that night as well. I picked the Thompson Brothers over the Macallan as well. And that was doing it blind. I have to say, though, that every time I've gone into this Macallan, considering it's a 40% whiskey, and I used it very recently up against a Glen Elgin on the vPub, considering it's a 40% whiskey, it always performs very, very well. Those tiny wee stills at Macallan, now remember, the cork broke the last time I used this. The tiny wee stills do very, very well for this distillery. We're not going to get any glug out of that. There's not enough left in the bottle tonight. This is probably maybe the darkest whiskey I'll pour tonight. I don't know if you can see just how dark it is. And why is that something worth noting? Well, because it's Macallan, we know that it's natural colour. However, they still don't put that on the cask. Or I don't believe that they do. Sorry, on the bottle. They might write it on the back there. There's quite a paragraph there. I don't know. I'll hold it up and hope that the camera focuses for your benefit. But there we go. You can freeze there and see what Macallan have to say. But I don't think they talk about the colour at all. That said, I am told, reliably so, that Macallan is all natural colour. First time I've had sulphur tonight. Wow. This is not a sulphury whiskey. I've never had sulphur from it before. Never had anything sulphury. But that was a wee bit like somebody had just let off a firework. I'm not talking about egg or fart or awful sulphur. I'm talking about struck match. Wow. It must just be because of what I've never had that from this glass of whiskey before. I mean, I know it's part of the profile and things, but it's never been that stark. Right on the back of that really super bright Glenmorangie, maybe. The kind of tropical pineapple-y brightness has kind of made this really quite heavy and sulphury. It's not bad. It's a positive thing. Wow. But it's difficult now for me to reach past. Still 40% ABV, so it should be easy to access the nose on this one. Spice, wood spice, sandalwood, cedarwood. Wood shop, just generally, just kind of very wood. A little bit of a creosote. So you can see what vein of flavour I'm on. Violet, what are the sweets called? The Parma violets. Is that what they're called? Parma violets? So I suppose that's kind of violet lavender. And dark plain chocolate, almost like a Black Forest Gateau type thing. Great, easy to access nose at this ABV. I paid 90 pounds for this bottle of whiskey. Interestingly, the 12-year-old sherry oak right now, as it happens, is there's probably plenty stock out there. It's on offer in quite a few places, and it's dropped down to the low 70s if you shop around. So you're getting quite a good deal on it right now, which has not been typical over recent years. But so everything I'm going to say has to be through the lens of the fact that if you want to go out and buy this, it is by a factor of 2 or 3 the most expensive whiskey that we're talking about in this lineup tonight. It's the third bestseller. It's one of the biggest distilleries in Scotland at 15 million litres. What we are drinking from this bottle is not from the new distillery. It's 12 years old. It's from the old distillery, the wee distillery that sits next door. You can still go and visit and have a wee look at it. This is good liquid. Oh my goodness. Justin Wan has bought me a dram to say I said Justin Rickman instead of Julian Rickman. And Justin is saying, you just said Justin instead of Julian Rickman, and it needs rectifying. I'm so sorry, Julian, and I'm so grateful, Justin. Thank you very, very much. Cheers, Julian, and cheers, Justin. Brilliant stuff. And just a very, very... there's no other way to be about this other than to just recognise in the company that I'm sipping it in tonight, of course, the caveat, it's still a very, very good... There's a velvetiness there, a velvety texture. Quite surprising. I'm not paying 90 quid for it ever again. When this bottle is drained, there's plenty out there. I can buy the Thompson Brothers 6-year-old blended malt whiskey that gives me every bit of that experience right now for £35, less than half the price. I'm not doing it. But you can see how they're able to do what they're doing with that product. Is it the wee stills? Is it the use of sherry casks? This is the 12-year-old sherry oak, of course. Arguably, I should have used the Macallan double cask for this exercise, but I'm not buying any more Macallan. The one I had on the shelf was this one. Position 3, we're going to start to run out. Position 2 and 1 is not going to fit on the thing. There's another red banner coming in from our pal, Wook. Thank you so much, my friend. The generosity continues. You've given me enough there to replace that bottle of Macallan. I'll use it on something else. I hope you don't mind. But Wook, thank you so much for your generosity, your continued generosity. Projects like the Aquavitae channel, projects like Dramface, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, most of the other YouTube channels that are out there, and most of the other independent websites that are out there all exist on the back of community funding. That's how these things work. The fact that there are people out there willing to step up and fund that, generously so, consistently so, when you can, however you're able to do it, I love it. I will celebrate it. I'll raise a glass to you all the time. Whether you donate €2 or €200. I love it. Thank you for helping things like this exist. Cheers. And a surprisingly good wee dram of whiskey. Just too expensive. It's just the facts. It's just what it is. Hellswood is saying, for that sort of money, we can buy Craigellachie's 17-year-old. A much better whiskey experience, in our humble opinion. I will grant you that. A Craigellachie 17-year-old would take this Macallan 12 at its 40%, up an alleyway, empty its pockets, steal its lunch, leave it it would absolutely destroy this Macallan. The Macallan is head and shoulders above everything else that I've sipped so far tonight, based on that context and nothing more. The fact that it's £90 and you can buy a Craigellachie 17 for that, it's a no-brainer. Craigellachie 17, worm tub. Macallan's got small stills, it's not worm tub. Craigellachie 17 is worm tub and 46% all natural whiskey. It makes a difference. Okay, the top two is all that's left to share with you tonight. As I tell you how many bottles of Macallan, don't tell me that's missing too. What's happening here? That's a wee shame. It doesn't matter because I mention it in the next slide, but that's a shame. I double checked this as well. It's really frustrating when these wee quirky things happen. Anyway, I can tell you that Macallan is pretty massive in terms of sales, but I can tell you as I announce what is position number 2, how many bottles of Macallan are sold. Position 2 is also a perma-shelf bottle for me, but for a slightly different reason. I don't know if it's a loyalty thing or just something that's always been, so always will be. But position 2 forever was the best-selling single malt Scotch whisky. And in recent years, it's been toppled. Position 2 is Glenfiddich 12-year-old. 40% ABV, that fantastically unique triangular profile that hopefully you can see. It's been kind of rounded, it's less sharp these days, but it's still there. Certain things, a wee chevron on the front under the stag here is kind of exaggerated a bit. A couple of red highlights on here, but this is still very recognizable even from a distance, despite the fact that it's now a white label instead of a green label as Glenfiddich 12-year-old. Another Grant's product, the third Grant's product that we're talking about tonight. We've had Balvenie already. We've had Monkey Shoulder, and now we're into Glenfiddich. And a lot of you that have been around the vPub for long enough will know that I often use Glenfiddich as my calibrator, something that I recognised, so comfortable with. I just knew, so before I went into a tasting, a blind tasting, a general tasting, whatever it may be, I just kind of knew I had that solid reference point there of Glenfiddich 12. I think it's been years since I've actually actively done that. Craig McGinn has brought me a wee dram. No comment or anything, Craig. I think you already did buy me a dram earlier as well tonight. But it's wonderful to have your support, and thank you very much for your generosity. Craig, cheers to you. I'll take the sip in a second because there's a... I expected the Glenfiddich 12 to be as light as the Glen Grant, despite it being number 2. But as I nose this tonight, there's a much kind of darker side to it. It's a honey, quite a rich honey, maybe even a wee bit of beeswax. It's quite floral. When I was nosing it, I was quite surprised how nice it was nosing. It's been the theme tonight, isn't it? The accessibility of the nose on them all. A wee bit of kind of a polo mint freshness, lemon, sweet apple, green apple, yellow apple, golden delicious, that kind of apple. No, pear, sweet pear. Cheers, Craig McGinn, cheers. asking a lot of that Glenfiddich. After how kind of the weight of the Macallan that I just sipped, my expectation that the Glenfiddich was going to be really kind of just dissipate, just be far too light and not have the heft or the weight. We often forget that Glenfiddich's get direct fire stills, right? There's actually weight to this. I suppose if you were sipping this in isolation, you might not pick up on it. It's just very light and accessible. But there's actually good body to this for a 40% ABV whiskey. Again, in the context of what I'm sipping tonight. Quite a surprise. Quite a surprise. There's a reason I've always got this on the shelf, and there's a reason that I've got multiple variations of it, a bit like the Glenmorangie. I've got kind of reasonably recent things to compare it to. I've got much older branded products. In fact, I think on the shelf here, occasionally you'll see a really old Glenfiddich sitting here too. All very familiar to us, right? But this is in position number 2. It tells us that Macallan is 11.4 million bottles from a 15 million litre facility. But Glenfiddich is in position number 2. Are you ready for this? It's not even the same sport. 18.5 million bottles of Glenfiddich sold every year. It's quite a shock to me that it can actually taste that good when they are at that scale. And that scale, I don't mean that scale as in, wow, isn't that an amazing amount of bottles of whiskey? I'm talking about when we compare it to everything else. So if you look at position 10, the Glen Grant at 3 millions, halfway through, 5 million for the Balvenie, 6 million for that, 8.4 million for that Monkey Shoulder. But 18.5 million, more than double that. And streets ahead of the next nearest competitor, Macallan. Macallan is actually going down. In terms of bottle sales, bottles sold, Macallan is going down year after year, ever so slightly. And yet their revenue is going up. I think we can all work out how they are doing such a thing. That's their model. We have only got one more bottle, one more product, one more brand to share with you. And it is a distillery too, because that's the theme tonight for the top 10, apart from that Monkey Shoulder. The only departure we've had from the fact that it's a brand and a distillery tonight is the Monkey Shoulder. So this is a brand and a distillery, but it's a wee bit more than that when you think about it. And it's fought hard over the years to get to this number 1 position. And I think all of you know what that is. My chat is frozen. I'm just going to refresh that and scroll to the bottom to catch up with you. Tim is saying, Donner Pass Whiskey is saying, my mum brought me a book, A Sense of Place. That's the Dave Brown book, good. And a bottle of Glenfiddich 12 for Christmas. I was happily surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I think you're talking about the book and the bottle, aren't you, Tim? Red Mordecai is saying, we get Glenfiddich 12 kosher American oak here in Israel. It costs slightly more, but ooh, it's lovely stuff. Similar to Glenmorangie 10. Be curious to try that one day, right? Why is it only Israel that's getting that? Justin Wan is saying Whiskey Radar. It deserves to be after all the marketing budget is spent. Brian Storm is saying, for me, Aquavitae, rightly or wrongly, you need Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, and sadly Macallan in your collection to compare against. They are mainstays. Brian, I think it's kind of the point I'm trying to make tonight is that how do we know the stuff we are sipping is the best? How do we guard against that snobbery, against that kind of aloofness? The only way to do it is to do what you're suggesting, and is to have these there as anchors, as resets, as calibrators, as guides, as buffers. If we are not doing that, I don't think we're getting the full experience out of the really special, intense, dense, brilliant whiskies that we are sipping day to day. Sachin is saying, how dangerous is it to have direct fired stills? Well, not back in the days where you were shoveling coal, it's probably a wee bit more dangerous than today where it's controlled gas flame, things like that. Lolander is saying, sorry, it skipped Lolander. This looks like the SPFL Premiership table with them lot in Glasgow miles ahead of everyone else. So I'll let you decide whether Glenfiddich is Celtic or Rangers, or whether the next one is going to be Celtic or Rangers Lowlander. You can apply it as you see fit. But most of you surely have guessed the fact that the number one position is, of course, the Glenlivet. This disappeared for a while, didn't it? This became the Founders Reserve for a while. Glenfiddich kept its 12-year age statement. Glenmorangie kept its 10-year age statement. The Glenlivet ran into huge stock problems and had to switch out to Founders Reserve. Founders Reserve is what's made the difference. It's not this 12-year-old. Founders Reserve has bizarrely been the thing that has made the Glenlivet the best-selling global single malt whiskey. It was a bit raw. We didn't like it when it first came out, Founders Reserve. We were happy with a 12-year-old. We were angry when they took the age statement away and gave us an on-age statement product. Well, now they've got the age-stated product back again. They've kept the Founders Reserve. Of course they have. It's one of the most popular product launches that's ever existed in Scotch whisky. And don't you notice a theme? The things that we don't connect with, the things that we don't rate or understand, are heavily represented in this lineup tonight. They are doing a very, very different thing. And I think it's something to be recognized, whether you view it as a problem or a positive. Everything I'm sharing with you tonight, with the exception arguably maybe of the Talisker, is very, very low ABV. And somebody, I think it was Anthony Lambert, already talked about being a squaddy earlier and drinking and getting an inexpensive bottle of Scotch whisky in order to get drunk on a budget. Herein lies the problem with everything I'm sharing with you tonight. Don't talk about 40% because alcohol is a barrier to enjoyment. Talk about 40% to make the cheapest bottle of whiskey you can. Talk about the cheapest way to work within the definitions and put a product out there that people can buy. Talk about the fact that you still have to make it as tasty as possible despite all the restrictions that's been put on you. Remember who you're speaking to people who do not sit with a tulip-shaped Glencairn glass and try and pick out aromas and flavours like we do. People that like whiskey purely for the flavour of whiskey and nothing more. 90% of the whiskey drinkers globally, that's who they are. However, I put it to you that they are drinking. We have learned how tasting can be more beneficial, dare I say better, than drinking. After 3-4 drams of 40% whiskey, it just becomes whiskey flavour. What we are doing is wanting every sip, every next tiny little pour, every next nosing, every next kind of pontification, analysis, whatever it is that we do, it's about that. It's not about the drinking. It's about the difference, the variation, the excitement, the flavour, the aroma, the everything. The next difference, the next epiphany, the next step up, the next wow moment. And the wow moment doesn't come from being drunk. It comes from flavour, from quality, from texture, from definition, from density. That's what we love. Isn't it interesting that the higher strength ABV drinks we consume, the less we drink and the more we taste? It's our job to reach out to these people that are drinking whiskey because they love the taste of whiskey, and teach them what the true taste of whiskey actually is. And it's not the feeling of drunk. It is the sensation of flavour and the aromas that it imparts. It is just fabulous to consider. That is the difference. That is why we do not connect with these whiskies, because it over-delivers on the nose versus expectation and vastly under-delivers on the palate versus expectation or price point, typically. We have found a plethora of places to explore that flips that on its head, things that over-deliver. That's why we are here as a community, and that's what we enjoy. As I sip the world's best-selling single malt whiskey, I have to say it's as good as I've ever nosed it. I'm definitely getting pineapple from it. It's very fruity. Let me be pretentious and say it's appley, but it's red apples. This is a sweet, crunchy red apple. Bruised apples. Maybe even kind of like apple pastries. Let's bring in some brown sugar. Demerara sugar. And a wee bit of sweet Satsuma citrus. Ah, it's a bloody shame. Oh, yeah, I wanted that. We were doing well there. Singleton over-delivered, Macallan over-delivered, Glenfiddich over-delivered, Glenmorangie delivered. And here we are again, a great nose with Glenlivet 12. And just a diluted, watery palate, flat. Such a shame. $18.5 million bottles a year of Glenfiddich. Well, Glenlivet has taken the throne away from Glenfiddich in recent years. 19.8 million litres of Glenlivet sold globally in 2022. It has the top spot there. I'm not sure it deserves it. I think the Founders Reserve has turned out to be a fantastic product for the success of a business. Seems to be doing okay for Scotch whisky, generally, arguably, you could say. But for people that care about whisky and understand what whisky actually is, it's just no. It's a successful business model is what it is, rather than a successful whisky. Great nose. Genuinely interesting wee nose. Literally already like somebody's added a teaspoon too much of water to that wee dram. Hey ho. We've had some interesting drams tonight. We really have. I've been surprised by a couple, but more than anything, I am keen to now go back to some of the really, really super dense, higher ABV, yes, more expensive, more niche, more exclusive products that we tend to enjoy as a community, to see what the difference actually is. Reb is saying, I know your list is made up of popular budget stuff, but there are some fantastic budget bottles. Glen Scotia 10, Loch Lomond 10, Glenmorangie 12, First Fill. Reb, the most important thing you need to understand, this is not Aquavita's list. This is the 10 best-selling single malts globally. These are the whiskies that are representing Scotch single malt right now across the planet. Anthony's saying, raise a glass to you on that. They just days of getting pished on whiskey are nearly 40 years behind me. This is Anthony Lambert. I love to show younger friends how much flavour and variation there is in whiskey. That's incumbent, Anthony, upon us all. The quicker that our next generations can discover that whiskey delivers flavour more than alcohol, Perfect, Aquavite, says Mark Chapin. Thank you for the agreement. Graham Young is saying, thanks for a great vPub, Roy. Wish I did enjoy a highball, just don't. But all good here because in the summer, I flip to bourbons and I love it. There's your change. This is good as a break, Graham. Works perfectly. I'm not going to cheers you with a glass of water. Give me a minute. And I'll give you a wee love and a like on that as well, my friend. And also my pal. Jimmy Legg, I must have missed that one. And John Bell. I can't miss those. I can't miss the John Bells and the Jimmy Leggs. John Bell bought me a dram to say, glad I could finally stop for a while. Good to see you, John. Great topic. It's always good to go back and recalibrate. Boston Celtics are in the finals tonight. Time to go soon. Let's raise a wee glass for your team, John. I hope the Celtics do you well tonight, buddy. Cheers. Thanks for your dram. Jimmy Legg has bought me a dram as well, saying, if you say you like this Glenlivet, I know you've been replaced by an alien. I don't dislike it, Jimmy, but I do feel a wee bit let down by it, if I'm honest. It knows as well. Very fruity. But just, I'm sorry, just a wee bit watery. Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you for the dram. And Danny Hebbington as well has chipped in a dram as well. You made it. I tip my hat to you. Well done, mate. Okay, he's celebrating the fact that I've made it through 10 wee tiny drams on a vPub. And only minorly slurring my words, right? Still got a quiz at the end to get through though, Danny, right? Cheers, fella. Thank you for your dram. Thanks to Graham Young. Thanks to Jimmy Legg. And thanks to the one that just dropped off screen as well, the one I missed, John Bell. Of course, John. Looking forward to seeing you again soon, buddy. Cheers. So, in summary, I've made my point. It's fantastic that these are representing Scotch whisky right across the globe. But of course, I now draw everything back in, shut the doors, drop the window blinds, close the curtains. It's just us again. It's just the vPub. Let's get rid of all of this. And let's ask the question, what would we do? I can tell you the prices for all of the whiskies I bought tonight. Glen Grant was £29. Very cheap. Aberlour, £30. Laphroaig, £31. Talisker, £34. Do you notice a pattern here? We step up a wee bit for the Balvenie at £45, a bit expensive. Drop right back down again for Singleton, £27. Glenmorangie, £28. Glenfiddich, £30. Glenlivet, £31. And the big outlier, the big massive spike right in the middle of everything else is that Macallan. £90, but you can pick it up for mid-70s, 78 right now. They seem to be struggling to sell as much as they once did. So it's on offer, something that never used to happen in recent years. If you bought all of those whiskies at the prices that you can buy them today, and I have to admit that's me kind of shopping around for the cheapest prices online. If you go into your local supermarket, you'll get a bit cheaper. If you go into your spirits retailer, your specialist retailer, you'll have to pay closer to RRP, which is fine because of the service that they're bringing. And these are not the whiskies that they're interested in selling to you, to be honest. But if you were to buy my entire collection of whiskey tonight, all the top 10 bestsellers, you would pay £353. £353. Throw in a monkey shoulder at £24, it goes to 387. Regardless, sorry, 377. Regardless, would I pay £353 for all of this? Or would I pay £353 on the stuff that I mostly connect with? I would much rather go out and spend £100 on this rather than 4 bottles of Diageo's Singleton. I would much rather go out and spend £95 on this rather than a bottle of Macallan every single day of the week, twice on a Sunday. And I would rather go out and spend £150 on this rather than half a dozen bottles of something that nosed beautifully and sipped as flat as hell. The 3 bottles are things that I have shared with you in very recent vPubs. Bladnock's single cask sherry cask, lights out. The Whiskey Sponge Glen Scotia 11-year-old, So densely flavoured. The best Glen Scotia I've had in the last few years. Amazing. I've had a few more drams out of that since I opened it on the vPub a couple of weeks ago, last week. And Brooklandy's 18-year-old. There's not much of this left. I dread to open this wee cardboard sleeve and see how little there is of this 150 quid whiskey. I'm not quite down to the dregs yet, but I'm getting close. £150 I paid for this. Interestingly, I also saw this on offer recently as well. Good times for the drinker. So, out of pure coincidence, those 3 bottles add up to almost the exact same as the 10 bottles behind them. Now I ask you, what would you buy? 3 bottles of things that will make you understand what it means to be alive? Or 10 bottles of transition from lucid to mellow? Drinking and tasting are different things. Natural, earnest integrity is different from designed to a price point. We don't need to be snobby about one or the other. We don't need to pretend that the other doesn't exist. We can embrace it all, but we have to contextualize it and we have to understand the place that it has. These are the best sellers for a reason, because they're affordable, because they're cheap. And in order to be cheap, with a couple of exceptions, obviously, in order to be cheap, they have to make it to that price point. I prefer my whiskey when it's affordable and life-affirming. I think you do too. Aye, okay. How are we doing for time? 2 hours 22. 3 little ducks. My goodness. Adrian Madrigal, my fantastic. Good, so good to see you, Adrian. He's saying those are whiskies that are mostly available in Latin America. I don't doubt for a second it will be widely distributed everywhere. Cheng, so good to see you, Cheng. Great vPub Aquaviti again. No wonder how many times we hope these bottles to bump up the ABV. It won't happen because they're still selling the whiskey and they're doing a different thing. I would like these producers to bring us something that we love too. John Bell is saying, what are you doing with these bottles after the vPub? There's always a place for these things to go. Highballs. That's a lot of highballs, isn't it? Justin Lannis saying, Aquaviti, recently my office bought 3 bottles of that Glenlivet 12 for an office party. That's exactly what it's for, people getting pished. And that's a shame, Justin. It is. But if it's not Scotch whiskey doing it, it's going to be something else that's doing it. So there's an argument there too. Justin again is saying, take away that Macallan and it's actually not too bad. It's interesting, if you take the Macallan out of that £353, that would be £263, okay? And then you add in that Thompson Brothers and you can get the whole 10 bottles for 300 quid or thereabouts. If you swap out with the 6-year-old Thompson Brothers blend, it's not available everywhere, I understand. Okay. What do you think of Dewar's 32 double? I'm not going to say your name out loud, Mr. McGee, because it's a wee bit rude, but that's all right. What do you think of Dewar's double 32-year-old? Unfortunately, in Canada, if you live in Canada, it's a bargain. Anytime I've seen it here, it's fairly overpriced and often in 50 cl bottles. So I haven't engaged with it yet. New name, Mr. McGee. Nice to welcome you in. Change the start of your name and I can shout you out. Adverte is saying, preach, brother. Danny Hebbington is saying, do last week again, lol. We'll stay. I know. Last week Danny, as you know, I was almost in tears. Adverte, fantastic. Good to see you. And Fernando saying, Roy Aquaviti, cannot disagree with you at all. Better value for sure. Oh dear, Jimmy Legg is saying, Aquaviti, I thought you were saving me some Brook Laddie. I'd forgotten about that, so you're going to have to remind me about these promises, Jimmy. But there's still a wee bit left for you. Whiskey with Molly saying that's not even a question, Aquaviti. Speaking of which, I need to pick up some life-changing bottles from you. You have a big permanent marker, Ben, written across a box right here for you now. Maybe I can help you with that, Ben. Maybe I can come to you or we can meet up to make it a bit easier. Willie Buchanan, good to see you, Willie. I hope Morag, Colin and the family are doing well. Hi, Roy, quality every time. Thank you, Wally. Always nice to welcome you here. Or clink a wee glass with you if we meet up. Steve Atkiss is saying, quality, quality, quality. Absolutely, of course. Craig McGinnis saying, I've just replaced my Bruichladdich 18, definitely my preferred dram. And that was expensive when it dropped, right, Craig? 150 quid, but we love this stuff. It's gorgeous. Ebhead Rolfie in Norway saying, you've been very kind to the top 10 bottles. I know you sincerely love some of them. Cheers, Roy. I do, Rolfie. Dornpass Whiskey saying Aquavita My Bruichladdich 18 was a leaky bottle too. So good, absolutely. The best bottles always end up being leaky. So there we have it for tonight. The top 10 best sellers. I do have a wee quiz at the end. I can't make any promises. I probably tried to make it accessible and easy, but I can't be like all of these producers. I have to, there has to be a challenge. There has to be something memorable. There has to be something that motivates and makes me want to. Let's have a wee go on that bottle I poured for Reb's 60th toast tonight. I've had 2 or 3 drams of this since I opened it on the vPub last week. Again, just wee teaspoons, it's all you need. 11 years old, forget that. 53% ABV, forget that. Glen Scotia, acknowledge that. Cough sweets. Red cola. Waves of salinity. Just flavor, flavor, flavor. Intense, ridiculous waves of flavor. Just, you need a second sip in order just to try and grab some of the things that you potentially missed. This is the Glentoon. This is the whiskey sponge bottling that I shared with you, the Campbelltown bottle of last week. Fantastic, Glen Scotia. And that Balvenie, I hope that you know that I took that to Limburg with me and left it behind with a pal of mine. And when I came back, I had to try and source another bottle of it. I needed to have it. Our whiskey is not at risk because of this whiskey. They can exist side by side. I think it's always important that we remember the places and the applications that they're both used in. Sandro Fazzolari is saying, okay, sorry, I've got a drama from Jimmy. Is that another one? Did I get that one? No, it's a new one. Jimmy is saying, I may or may not say that I think you're saving me some of every bottle I like. Go right ahead. Jimmy, I think next time we just need to spend a wee bit more time in this room when there's no cars to be driven or appointments to be kept. Thank you, buddy. And Sandra is saying, just home from dinner. We'll catch the replay. Thanks, Aquavita, and ciao, everyone. Cheers to you, Sandra, as well. Everyone is saying, why choice and diversity and whiskey is wonderful. But even simple aged single malts are a big upgrade for many people. If you like it, you like it. If it's shared with friends, even better. Absolutely, Chris. And we have to remember that and so many times I'm exposed to people who are sipping whiskey for the first time, or it's maybe not their first time, they feel like they're comfortable with whiskey, but the things that you give them are just so intense, or the ABV is so kind of prohibitive for them. It does take a bit of investment on somebody to sip a few times and to get their head around higher ABV. What it does, it's a bit like maybe spicy food or really strong coffee or something. It just, once you get your head around it, you learn to love it and respect it. Graham Young has seen the Balvenie was really an amazing dram, and what a fantastic company we had in Limburg. Priceless Aquavita. So amazing, so amazing. Justin Wan is saying, talking about the dram, of course, and the time we had in Limburg, Graham. Justin is saying, eyelids getting heavy again, got to go regretfully before the quiz again. Catch up soon. Justin, you're in Hong Kong, hours ahead of us. You're a trooper. Thanks for staying again tonight. Sleep well, big guy, and let us know how you got on in the quiz. Tim is saying, finishing with signatory 100 Imperial Proof secret Orkney. Okay. Sherry butts with bourbon hogsheads. This one is a beauty, especially considering that the distillery bottles are today. 14-year-old Highland Park would otherwise cost a hell of a lot more than the 40 or 50 quid that one is costing, right? 57.1% ABV as well. Everyone is saying Aquavitae. I've shared many a finer whiskey with folks that had no desire to dive into them. The more standard whiskies serve the friendship sharing just fine. That seems more important. That's a brilliant way to look at it, Chris. Absolutely. Sometimes the whiskey is not the focal point. Sometimes it's the people. Jason Whiskey Wise is saying, I need to visit you soon and bring a few drams to share. It's been long overdue. Well, it was nice to hang out with you last year, Jason. I loved it. Sachin Kent is saying, I introduced a neighbour to whiskey. His actual words, I never knew whiskey could taste like this. Don't you love it? You just love it. And obviously they're picking up on a wee bit of your passion and things as well, Sachin, no doubt. But it's amazing when other people are like, oh my goodness. And there's a good chance that you might be able to change their relationship with alcohol. Listen, I can't preach to anyone. I've sat and sipped 10 whiskies in front of you tonight, but I want you to notice how much whiskey is still left in all of these glasses. It's very much about the flavour experience. I always say, there's no nutrition, there's no vitamins here, there's no sustenance, there's no reason to drink this liquid, none, other than for it to connect with all of your primary senses and make you realize what it is to be alive. The privilege of mortality. It's wonderful. Hello, Roy. A little bit late, but here. Lol, says Gino Como. Good to see you, Gino. I hope you are sitting comfortably. Your pal Graham has been in for a while already tonight. Come on, I'm tired. Quiz, please, Aquavitae. Now you've been made a moderator. You're starting to become a director as well. All right, Ben. All right. Whatever you say. Whatever you say. Let's bring up this wee quiz. Remember, if you are going to parachute, if you are going to leave us tonight, that's okay. But you might have some fun with the quiz. So at least try and pick it up on the replay. You might learn a wee bit. You might be, your curiosity might be piqued somewhat, and you might find that it's very on theme with everything that was spoken about tonight. I don't know how much that's actually going to help you, though. Regardless, it's all multiple choice. Only share your score if you want to. You're only playing against yourself. Mike Molasses saying life's hard lessons. Never try to keep up with Aquavitae during a vPub hick. Well, I suspect, Mike, that I'm doing a better job of acting up than you are, and also you've probably been sipping a wee bit more than I have. Thank you for the effort, Mike. Wonderful to have you in, buddy. Okay, question 1. Which of these statements is true about Talisker's Port Truey? Going to give you 3 statements. You tell me what is true about Talisker's Port Truey. A, it's presented at 57% ABV. B, it's non-age stated. C, it's finished in port casks. I note there is not a banana icon here tonight. No banana skin here tonight, but there is actually a banana skin. This slide should have a banana skin next to it. Be careful, please. Port Truey from Talisker is either A, presented at 57% ABV, B, non-age stated, or C, finished in port casks. Mark is here. Oh, wow, what timing. Join for question 1. Mark, I hope you go back and skim through. If I've done my homework, there should be chapter markers in for you to skim through tonight as well and pick up what we've been blethering about. Hopefully it shouldn't affect too much your participation in the quiz. Well, as I was saying, at least B and C. Where's Roy is saying BC. Good to see you. Where's Roy? Ben Damon Hunter is saying BC. Steve Atkins is saying B more so. Black Fen is saying B and C. I can tell you that Talisker's Port Truey was non-age statement and finished in port casks. It was 45.8% ABV. So if you answered B or C tonight, you get the first one. It was not all tonight. It was a wee bit of a banana skin. Apologies for not putting the banana skin icon in there. If you take umbrage at that, which you are entitled to do, you can give yourself the point regardless. Nobody should go home from the vPub quiz at the end on a 0 or a donut. So take it, please, as we go into question 2. What has happened at Laphroaig in the last 2 years due to a decision made by Diageo? Something has impacted Laphroaig. They've had to put some investment in because of a decision that was taken at Diageo. Is it A, it had to change its water source? B, it had to increase its in-house malting? Or C, it had to add external washbacks? What has changed at Laphroaig in recent years because of a Diageo decision? Dancing Midgie Photography is in. Glenn, so good to see you. So good to welcome you to a vPub. I hope you're comfortable and doing very well. Bruce Bernard is here. Good to see you, Bruce. Peter Box is here. Amazing, Peter. Amazing to see you back in. Nicholas is here. It's great to catch up with everyone at the quiz at the end, and I still miss names. Jimmy Jazz is here. Bet you've been here all night, Jimmy, and it's the first time I've noticed your name. So sorry, buddy. That happens so regularly. The Ginger Genius is here too. Good to see you. Good to welcome you back. Kyle Taylor. Fantastic, Kyle. I'll leave umbrage right where it is, says Jimmy. Okay. What happened at Laphroaig? You've all got this absolutely spot on. Because of the decision that Diageo would no longer supply any external companies from its Port Ellen maltings, they all had to make different arrangements for their malting. Part of that at Laphroaig was to source from elsewhere, but also to increase by quite a considerable proportion, up to 50%, of their malt is going to now be provided by their in-house floor malting. I see that as only being a positive thing for Laphroaig Spirit, to be honest. Question 3. Which of the following is the best seller in Scotland and the second best seller in the UK? So I'm looking for the best selling Scotch malt whisky, and as it turns out, it's also the second best selling Scotch whisky in the UK. A, Monkey Shoulder, B, Jura, or C, Glenmorangie? I should clarify malt. It has to be malt. All of the options A, B, and C are all malt. One is Monkey Shoulders, a blended malt. Jura is a single malt. Glenmorangie, of course, is a single malt. Knowledgeable folk, and yet there is a banana skin here. Those frugal Scots, says Jimmy Legg. Anthony's saying, I reckon B, but why? I'm looking for the best seller in Scotland and the second best seller in the UK. Fernando is going for C. Whiskey Radar C. Steve Atkiss C. Ebhead C. Rotodram C. Ben Damon Hunter saying, oh, C. Where's Roy C? Peter Box C. Gino Como C. Whiskey Central. Shayla. Shayla's here. That makes me feel very, very happy. I hope you're well, Shayla. It's wonderful to welcome you in the vPub. She's saying C. Everyone follow Shayla, please. I can tell you that Monkey Shoulder sells very, very well in the UK. Jura is the best-selling malt whisky in the UK, but the second best and the best seller in Scotland is Glenmorangie's 10-year-old. So if you answered C, give yourself a point. Graham Fraser is saying, I'll go C, and James Morgan, I'll plump for C, along with Graham Young, Glenn B, Bruce, Hellswood. Fantastic. Question 4. As well as Glenord, Glendullan, and Dufton, which other Diageo distillery can be found as part of the Singleton range. I shared 3 with you tonight. I sipped from Dufton, but you can also pick up Glendullan and Glenord. But there is another one that you can find out there in the wilderness. Is it from A, Laphroaig, B, Glenkinchie, C, Glenmorangie? Whiskey Radar. Vasile Glagola is here. Good to see you, Vasile. Julian Rickman saying A. Steve Atkins saying A. Mark Chapman, good to see you, Mark, saying A. Derek K. That looks like a new name, Derek. I used to have a pal with 2 R's and an ICK. It's nice to welcome you in here. You're going with A. Mikey Hay is saying A. And Boris, that looks also like a new name, saying A. Kevin M is saying A. Jack the Pickled Hound. Been a wee while since I've said that name out loud, Jack. Good to see you in. Going for A. Cotulf Ashby, that looks like a new name. Nice to see you playing along, and nice to welcome you in here, Cotulf. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. You're also saying A, and you're absolutely spot on. Glenmorangie is not a Diageo distillery, which meant it was a 50-50 between Laphroaig and Glenkinchie, was it, I said? Yeah, Glenkinchie. But here's a wee picture of it. It's gone back about, this bottle is about 20 years old now. This is a litre bottle, so it's probably a travel retail exclusive. But this is the Singleton of Laphroaig. Long discontinued, but they put it under the Singleton brand because Laphroaig was considered too difficult to pronounce, which I think is right enough. We're looking at a picture question here. Should be quite an obvious one for most of you. Where are we? Where are we? Are we in A, Glenfiddich, B, Glenlivet, or C, Macallan? Where are we? One of the top 3 for sure. Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Macallan. I suspect this is probably far too easy. Kevin M saying the Death Star. Was that not Rosile? Thank you for the gimme on 5, says Whiskey Central. Definitely looks like C, says Mikey Hay. Absolutely. We're now down on a... If you're on a tour, you wouldn't normally see it from this angle. This picture is taken from down on the floor, looking up. And this is definitely Macallan. So 5th picture question. Things are going to get tricky from here on in, as they always do. Question 6, banana skin. Which of the following statements is true about Aberlour? In today's top 10 list, A, it is the smallest in terms of capacity. B, it was Pernod's first Scotch distillery under their ownership. Or C, it was once gutted by fire. Whiskey Radar Roland on 5 out of 5, along with Tobias, Mike Molasses, Road to Dram Alberto, Hell's Wood, Peter Box, Graham Fraser, celebrating his pass already, Gino Camo as well, Danny Hebbington and Graham Young. Lots of 5 out of 5s that were in good shape to get a 10 out of 10 tonight if you keep it steady. Jimmy is saying, I don't know the answer to this question. It is tricky, I'll admit. Which of the following statements is true about Aberlour? It is the smallest in terms of capacity. Of the top 10, that is, in amongst the top 10. In today's top 10 list, B, it was Pernod's first Scotch distillery, or C, it was once gutted by fire. Okay. I'm kind of being kind. The smallest distilleries in the top 10 are actually Laphroaig, Talisker. Just a bit less than Aberlour. It was Pernod Ricard's first Scotch distillery, and it was also once gutted by fire. So anybody that answered B or C is getting a point for that. The fire was way back in 1896. The first major upgrade the distillery had actually was through that fire. Pernod Ricard first took over. Obviously, Aberlour was very popular in France. It's become ever more popular since, and that was because it was the first Scotch distillery that Pernod Ricard ever took ownership of. Question 7. Which malt whisky is made in direct-fired stills, fully matured on-site, and reduced only with water, local water, from the Robbie Dew spring? Which single malt am I talking about? Direct-fired, matured on-site, reduced only with local water. A, Glenmorangie. B, Glenfarclas. C, Glenfiddich. Danny, Mike Molasses, Graham Fraser, Steve Atkiss, Falsgraf, Rolfie Ebhead, 6 out of 6, all of you. Whiskey Radar, Tobias, Peter Box, Gino Camo, Where's Roy, Road to Dramalberto, Dornpass Whiskey, Hell's Wood, Boris, Kyle Taylor, lots of 6 out of 6. Lots. Graham Young. Which malt is made in direct fired stills, fully matured on site, and reduced only with water from the local Robbie Dew Springs? I can't put it past you. You're very knowledgeable people. Well done, everyone. Let's move on. You've kicked this one out of the park. You claim it. It is, of course, Glenfiddich. Well done. I thought I could throw you by putting Glenfarclas in there. But no, probably the Robbie Dew thing gave it away for you, right? Question 8. Another wee banana skin right at the end. How many of the top 10 bestsellers presented in tonight's session have their own operational floor maltings? I give you 10 distilleries tonight. Out of those 10, how many have operational floor maltings? A, none of them. B, one of them. C, 2 of them. Fernando is saying, you've been nice tonight, not a difficult quiz, thanks. Don't speak too soon, Fernando. Hold it together, see how you got on. There's lots of 7 out of 7s, that's for sure. Good to see. We're in good shape for maybe celebrating a 10 out of 10 for our pal Reb's 60th birthday. Let it out of the bag. Sorry, his 50th birthday. So if it's a banana, it must be 2. Anthony Lambert thinks it's A, or maybe not, maybe B, or perhaps C. You're absolutely right, Anthony. Gino is going with Graham, as I didn't see the quiz. Okay. Oh, you didn't see the topics or the list. You didn't see that. Okay, I can tell you that tonight we had Balvenie in the list with its own in-house maltings. And we also had Laphroaig, who has increased its maltings, as previously talked about. So there were 2. Jimmy Legg is spot on. It is 2 of the 10 had their own in-house maltings. Second from last, I'm going to try and read this out as best I can. I absolutely love this quote. If a body could just find out the exact proper proportion and quantity that ought to be drunk every day, and keep to that, I verily trow that he might live forever without dying at all, and that doctors and kirkyards would go out of fashion. That is a quote that I've picked up from Charles Maclean's Miscellany of Whisky. It is James Hogg being quoted by Christopher North in 1826. I love it. I want to ask you, what whisky is James Hogg talking about? A, he's talking about Lagavulin. B, he's talking about Talisker. Or C, he's talking about Glenlivet. Kirkyards, yes. Graveyards, Jimmy, graveyards. Yards of the Kirk. If a body could just find out the exact proper proportion and quantity that ought to be drunk every day and keep to that, I verily trow that he might live forever without dying at all, and that doctors and kirkyards would go out of fashion. We would say kirkyards. Who is poor Kirk? Kirk is the church. Whiskey Radar is suggesting Ardnamurchan. He's talking about Lagavulin, he's talking about Talisker, he's talking about Glenlivet. He is, of course. And if you want the full quotation, Not in the miscellany of whiskey. I think it's in one of Charlie's Wikipedias, or maybe one of his other publications where he expands on that quote. One of the best quotes ever. The idea that whiskey could actually be the elixir, right? He's talking about Glenlivet. Back in the day, potentially, I don't know, 1826, he was most likely talking about Glenlivet as the style of whiskey rather than the Glenlivet, which in 1826 would have been Minmore before it became the Glenlivet on its current site. He was most likely talking about just the Glen of the Livet, where 200 illicit distills existed at one point in time. And it was the most in-demand whiskey of the time too. That's what James Hogg was talking about as we roll into the ass hat at the end. Who is still on a 9 out of 9 after all of that? Donner Pass Whiskey, Tim. Kyle Taylor, Hell's Wood. Gino Camo, Where's Roy? Road to Dram Alberto, Mike Molasses, Tobias, Peter Box, Whiskey Radar, Falsgraf. Oh dear. Just as it moves. Ebhead, Rolfie on a 9 out of 9. Graham Fraser, 8 out of 9, says Steve Atkinson. I'm happy. Fantastic, Steve. Glen B, good to see you, Glenn. 9 out of 9. Fernando, and I can't believe it. 9 out of 9. Okay, let's go into the asshat at the end and see how grim it actually is. The number of expressions from today's top 10 list presented at 40% ABV domestically, where we buy it, of course, not export strength, but how many of the top 10 lists were presented at 40% ABV? It's about the same as, that is the number of expressions presented at a bare minimum 40% is about the same as A, the oldest Ardnamurchan malt whiskey in years, B, the age stated on Ardnahoe's inaugural, of course, in years, C, currently available flora and fauna expressions. So how many years would the oldest Ardnamurchan be? How many years are stated on Ardnahoe's inaugural? And how many currently available flora and fauna expressions are there? You need to find the answer to one of those and then match it with the amount of 40% ABV whiskies I shared with you out of the top 10 this evening. Graham Young is saying sort of a cheaty 9 out of 9 here. Don't admit to cheating. You're only playing against yourself, Graham. Don't worry. Glen B is on a 9 out of 9. Fernando, fantastic. Fantastic. Would be A. 7, methinks, says Graham Young. I want it to be A, says Mike Molasses. Dancing Midgie Photography says A. Ginger Genius is saying B, and Glen B is going with C. Glen B is going with C. Gino Camo, Road to Dram Alberto, Danny Hebbington, Derek K, Steve Atkiss, all going with A. Okay, I can tell you that, amazingly, the only whiskey I shared with you tonight that was not at a flat 40% ABV, there is a correlation between the best sellers and the ABV, definitely, was the Talisker, because of that tradition that Talisker has of going out there at 45.8% ABV. 9 of the other distilleries were putting their whiskey out at 40%, or the other brands, let's say. So currently available flora and fauna expressions, there are 11, so it was never going to be that. Age stated on Ardnahoe's inaugural was 5 years old. I shared it on a very recent vPub. The oldest Ardnamurchan malt, currently, until it ticks over imminently into 10 years old, is 9. So the answer was definitely A. Is there anyone out there still holding together a 10 out of 10? Huzzah, says Tobias. Looks like he's celebrating. Hellswood is celebrating a 10 out of 10. Gino Camo looks like he's celebrating a 10 out of 10. Falsgraf, Mike Molasses, loads of 10 out of 10s. What? It's not only the top 10 best-selling malt whiskies, it's the top quiz results for people getting 10 as well. Whoop, whoop, Helen is saying. Who am I missing? Graham Fraser, 10 out of 10. Fernando, 10 out of 10. Whiskey Radar Roland, Danny Hebington, no way, 10 out of 10. Come on, taps off. He's shouting. Superb, Danny. Superb. Graham Young, a very cheaty 10 out of 10. You deserve it, Graham. Take it. Go with it. Fantastic. Hellswood is saying, well done, fellow 10 out of 10s. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. An amazing time to be in whiskey, right? That we can go back to the stuff that we once considered dangerous, exploratory, right? And realize that it was merely a stepping stone into just a smorgasbord, a plethora, a really spoiled for choice landscape of whiskey to be exploring today. If you end up feeling a wee bit like me, a wee bit fatigued, and a wee bit like you've overindulged, it's probably because you've overindulged. It's probably because, and I don't mean in terms of drinking or alcohol consumption or anything, I think it's just that we're exposed to all the best of stuff. And sometimes a way to reset that is just to go back and remind ourselves how much we used to enjoy this. I think it's good to have a break. That should be the priority, to take a break when you can. Work out what works for you. And when we can't have a break, embrace a change instead. Jimmy Legg is saying, got to go, make Angie a cuppa, see you soon. Graham is saying, what a lovely Men-OS quiz. And Road to Drama is saying, great, refreshing vPub, thanks. Well, the ice has melted in my mixed drink. Where is it? It's over here. It's long gone now. It probably doesn't taste anything like as fresh as it once did. Not only is the ice melted, but the soda's gone quite flat as well. Still mineralic, still whiskey flavoured. Anyway, I've had a nice night tonight, and I'm doing okay. There's a lot of whiskey in the glasses here, but I'll just kind of, I don't need to finish them, not tonight. 10 whiskies poured, maybe more than 10 actually, but still lots of whiskey sitting about in the glasses. I'll deal with it later. Thank you all so much for participating in another vPub with me tonight. Next week, I'll be sitting with a guest. I'll be sitting with the marvelous human being, one of the warmest, friendliest guys in whiskey, Shelton Almeida. I hope you're looking forward to a wee guest session. But him and I will be sitting down and talking about what the industry drinks next week. And until then, I'll raise this glass of Glen Scotia's Wee Tune, something that I am very much enjoying. Sorry, Glen Tune from the Wee Tune. And remind you all that you're very dearly loved. And I look forward to hanging out with you again once more next week. And until then, kept it under 3 hours. Sláinte mhath.